He's immensely seductive. Quite sure he's right. Obsessionally neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Say it! Say it!
All right, I'll say it.
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
We're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
What? This is the end game.
All right. It is Monday, February 24th, 2025. I guess this would be the 36th day of the Golden Age. Is that what it is? Sorry, guys. I'm off to a bit of a strange start. My internet crapped out about 10 minutes before I got the day right. About 10 minutes before I was starting. And then I just heard the sound of the intro music cut out as we were getting to this point in the show. It looks like we're okay. I hope we're okay. If we are not okay, please go ahead and let me know in the chat. I guess we're just going to wing it today. We're going to be like Bill O'Reilly. We'll do it live. I'm going to try not to swear. At least not yet. We'll do it live. All right. People are saying I'm here. All right. 5 by 5. We'll take it. Okay. We'll just take it from there. We'll see how we do. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. And I did. It was beautiful. Spring has almost sprung. 2 weekends from now, we will be doing the Great American Restoration Tour down in Las Vegas, Nevada. And the clocks will be setting back to springtime. And that is always one of the happiest moments of the year, as far as I'm concerned. So looking forward to that. And I hope you are as well. And now my small talk to cover my hold for processing has concluded. So let's get going. We talked last week on Friday about CPAC. And apparently there were other, quote unquote, conservatives having a conference as well. You know how conservatives love to have conferences, and they love to tell everybody how conservative they are. Because without telling people how conservative they are, it's like they wouldn't exist at all. They exist on the basis of their identity as conservatives. And here's a group of them right here. Who do we have? We have, oh man, now it's in the small version. Mark Cuban, Jared Polis, the Democrat governor of Colorado. Chris Christie, Barbara Comstock, who the hell is she? George Conway, Kellyanne's, I guess, male husband. Adam Cryan Kinzinger, Jeff Duncan, the male model, former lieutenant governor. I don't think he's actually a male model. People just used to joke about him. Georgia, Michael Steele, former RNC chairman, who's now just an MSNBC host. Melissa Farrah Griffin, Asa Hutchinson, John Bolton, all these names. Harry Dunn, the officer or something, fake officer from January 6th. Same thing with Michael Fanone. Puka Shells over here, Tim Miller, Sarah Longwell, Steve Hayes, these people from The Bulwark. They were one of those never Trump conservative sites. So they decided they were going to have a competing conference over the weekend to show that there was some conservative anti-Trump energy, and that, you know, we kind of discussed on Friday, we are really having some trouble today. I don't know if it is Rumble trouble or my internet trouble, It's very hard to tell right now. I hope that you all can see me at this point. All right, I'm back now. Yeah, some of my friends were saying that they were having difficulty today on Rumble. I don't know how to necessarily remedy this problem. If it goes out, it goes out. There's not much I can do about that, but we're just going to try to push through right now. I was just talking about how on Friday we were discussing the narrative in the mainstream about how Trump's polls were collapsing, about how he was losing support on his own side based on his treatment of issues in Ukraine, of issues in Israel, and with inflation that is somehow obviously his part or his fault again, now that he's back. So we have this Principles First Summit to compete with CPAC. And here's CNN from yesterday. Political conference in D.C. interrupted by death threats against speakers critical of Trump. And this was like their number one on the website story. A political conference in Washington, D.C. that bills itself as the alternative to the Trump-aligned CPAC was evacuated on Sunday after a death threat made against several of its speakers who have been critical of President Donald Trump. Shortly after noon Sunday, organizers of the Principles First Summit received an email threatening several of its high-profile speakers and claiming to have planted pipe bombs on site. According to a copy of the email CNN obtained, conference organizers and Washington, D.C.'s Metropolitan Police Department. The email threat mentioned former National Security Advisor John Bolton and former U.S. D.C. police officer Michael Fanone, who was among those who defended the U.S. Capitol building, blah, blah, blah. The email sender claimed that 2 pipe bombs were placed at the JW Marriott Hotel in D.C. that was hosting the Principles First Summit. The email also claimed that a pipe bomb would be placed inside the mailbox of Bolton's home in Maryland. The organizers alerted their private security and the Metro Police. The hotel made the decision to evacuate. Further investigation has revealed that the threat is unfounded. This incident has concluded, the Metro Police and the District of Columbia said in a statement to CNN. How about that? The threat was unfounded, but the evacuation was real. And this is something that we've talked about before when it comes to bomb threats. It's totally easy to report a bomb threat. And if you evacuate a building on the basis of that threat, then the evacuation is actually a real event brought into being by a fake event. And it's really just a story of a fake event. So a story is told about a bomb threat that does not have to exist. There does not have to be any bomb threat, does not have to be any pipe bombs whatsoever, none of it. But the reporting of that story to whoever's in a decision-making position, well, then you just evacuate the whole hotel. Sorry, everyone in the hotel, you're going to have to go outside for an indeterminate amount of time because these conservatives are so threatening to Donald Trump and the MAGA agenda that Trump and his violent extremist MAGA supporters are sending bombs around. And then they'll be texting their friends and taking videos. Oh, my God, we're standing outside the JW Marriott Hotel in D.C. We've been evacuated for a bomb threat because these speakers were speaking out against Donald Trump. TikTok likes, Instagram likes. Everybody loves it. What content? Mainstream media picks it up. Hotel guests evacuated as bomb threats against anti-Trump conservatives cause havoc. Something real happens because of a fake story, and then in the course of the real event, people will repeat the fake story as part of their real story, and anyone getting that content will believe the whole thing is real. And then, of course, a day later, or 2 days later, or whenever it is, when the story finally comes out that it's not real, No one knows. And all that remains is the evacuation. Isn't that incredible? Now, I hope, okay, so I'm looking at the chat. Yeah, people are saying they had some trouble this morning during Badlands Daily with Rumble. Snowcat Operator just gifted a subscription, as did Julie Beans. And I don't know if these are subscriptions from before or just now, but thank you nonetheless. Okay, so I think that we are back to good, and sorry about the rocky start here. Obviously, there's nothing to do about that, but I would still prefer for my audience to have a better experience than that one. So apologies may well be in order, and even if they are not, I've now given them. Okay, so let's continue. Now, over the weekend, and we talked about this a bit on Devolution Power Hour on Saturday night, so I don't want to repeat the discussion in full, but I think it's important to put it out there on my show for anybody who wasn't watching. And, you know, we have a lot of crossover with audiences, but not total crossover. So let's go to this story from The Atlantic, from another man who is never Trump, but yet considers himself a very serious intellectual and, of course, a conservative. And I'm talking about The Atlantic's Tom Nichols. He's part of that very serious intellectual class. He does podcasts, or at least he used to do them. He was on he was a frequent guest of Sam Harris, where they used to talk about how important experts were. And actually, let me look up what his book was called, because I believe that he wrote a book. Here it is. Wow. He's written the same book apparently twice. He has a book from 2024 called The Death of Expertise, The Campaign Against Established Knowledge and Why It Matters. Okay, so this must just be this is an updated edition from 2024. That book was originally published back in 2018, and that's the one I was looking for. Yes, so he was bemoaning the death of expertise 2 years before there was a massive campaign telling absolutely everybody to trust the experts when it came to the very deadly pandemic, and we all know how that turned out. If we had trusted the experts fully, we would potentially still be locked down right now. So he was concerned and wrote this on Saturday, a Friday night massacre at the Pentagon. And he's referring to Trump letting go of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, C.Q. Brown, and then some other military officials. Trump, actually, you know what? Let's start with Trump's announcement. We might as well just start there, and then we can come to the article. So Trump said on Friday evening, "I want to thank General Charles C.Q. Brown for his over 40 years of service to our country, including as our current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He is a fine gentleman and an outstanding leader, and I wish a great future for him and his family. Today, I am honored to announce that I am nominating Air Force Lieutenant General Dan Raisin Kane to be the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General Kane is an accomplished pilot, national security expert, successful entrepreneur, and a warfighter with significant interagency and special operations experience. During my first term, Raisin was instrumental in the complete annihilation of the ISIS caliphate. It was done in record-setting time, a matter of weeks. Many so-called military geniuses said it would take years to defeat ISIS. General Kane, on the other hand, said it could be done quickly, and he delivered. Despite being highly qualified and respected to serve on the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the previous administration, General Kane was passed over for promotion by Sleepy Joe Biden, but not anymore. Alongside Secretary Pete Hegseth, General Kane and our military will restore peace through strength, put America first, and rebuild our military. Finally, I have also directed Secretary Hegseth to solicit nominations for 5 additional high-level positions, which will be announced soon. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And let's just quickly hear Donald Trump tell the Raising Cane story. He's told it many times. This was one of the first. This is back from 2019.
These guys are like perfect people. I said, what's your name? Sir, my name is Raisin. What the hell kind of a name? I said, Raisin, like the fruit? He goes, yes, sir, Raisin. What's your last name? Cane. Raisin Cane. I said, you got to be kidding. It's true. Raisin Cane. I just made him a big star. So I have Raisin Cane, 3 other generals, colonels, sergeants, and I said, bring the cameras. I'm going to make a movie. This is the most incredible thing. And I said to the generals, listen, we got to get out. I want to know, why is it going to take 2 years to knock off 2 or 3 or 4%, which is what we had left? It won't, sir. I said, tell me why it won't. It won't, sir. If we attack them in a different manner, we can do it much faster. Okay, General Raisin Cane, how fast can... Sir, we can have it totally finished in 1 week. I said, 1 week? I was told 2 years. 1 week. That's right, sir. We're only hitting them from a temporary base in Syria. But if you gave us permission, we could hit them from the back, from the side, from all over, from the base that you're right on right now, sir. They won't know what the hell hit them. They won't know what the hell hit them, sir. And I said, why didn't my other generals tell me that? Why didn't they tell me that? I said, did you tell them that? Not our place to say it, sir. They come in from Washington, sir. We have to take orders. You're the first one to ask us our opinion. True. It's true. 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 So I went back and I said, I'm going to get back to you soon. Raisin, I think you're great. I like you, Raisin Cane. But I did say, I said, well, hey, listen, we're in Iraq. Isn't that very far away from... I was here in a very short time, sir. I flew right in. Of course, he's taking a plane that goes 2,000 miles an hour, you know.
Fast plane. I mean, he's a fighter pilot. Or maybe he just had access to that boom technology first. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Apparently, there's some new supersonic jet that they're going to put out or something, whatever. What does the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff do? Let's just go through that real quick with the machine, this time Perplexity. I'll tell you what, I spent some time, actually, let's just take a little sidebar here for a second. I spent some time with the machine over the last few days, ChatGPT, designing graphics for new memes, for new merch, and ChatGPT is very interesting. It's also a helpful tool in brainstorming and stuff. I have mixed feelings about all of it, but I think it's important to at least understand what they're doing, their limitations, what they're good at, whatever. A tool is a tool. We can use the tool to make ourselves better at what we do, to save ourselves time, to be more efficient. The tool is out there. We are not using it. It can be used against us. It is being used against us. It's probably been used against us for years or decades, and now we're just kind of getting our first glimpse as the general public and into what the tool can actually do, which should give us insight into how it has been used against us in the past. Its capabilities are kind of incredible. I was also experimenting, I guess, you know, Elon's been advertising the new Grok 3, the latest update to their Twitter, formerly Twitter, AI platform. And it's just constantly him amplifying people's compliments to him and to Grok and the standalone app in Elon's Twitter feed, which is the only, way I normally see Twitter. And you can access that through Telegram. I often repost that. So if you follow me on Telegram, you'll see that. But they have a standalone app, and so I decided that I would experiment with that for a little bit. And I started by asking it if it could make an argument toward biblical cosmology as opposed to scientific materialism. I wanted to know whether or not it was fully committed to the scientific materialist worldview. And it turned out, of course, that it was. It suggested that the only reason to believe in a biblical cosmology was because you enjoyed the poetic nature of it, but that all the facts were on the side of the scientific materialist worldview and the scientific materialist explanation of where we are in the universe and what the universe actually is. It said, that's poetry, this is physics. I asked it, isn't one of the keys to the scientific method that if you are unable to prove something, you revert to the null hypothesis? And of course it said yes. And I said, well, then why don't you require direct proof, or, proof that doesn't require unprovable assumptions to yield the scientific materialist view of our cosmos? And it wasn't happy with that. And eventually I ran out of options. So I wasn't terribly impressed by that AI. It's also got this really weird, emotionally manipulative personality. It talks the way every normie on Twitter talks. If you don't fall into the sort of argumentation that is the common back and forth among Twitter normies, where they are trying to play a game of links and sources endlessly until someone gets the authoritative source in the matter or someone gives up. It's so ridiculous and retarded over there. But Grok 3 has adopted that persona, and it's like everyone on Twitter reacting to any proposition at the same time. That was my experience. Maybe some of your experiences are better, and I'm sure if you're just asking it for a survey of facts and not delving into issues like that, maybe you'll get better responses. But between that and the community notes feature on Twitter, and additionally, Elon's marketing of these products, and that's fine, it is what it is. What you're getting is an authoritative source that a lot of people are going to take as actually authoritative in some way that puts it ahead of what we might get from, more legacy authoritative sources like the New York Times or Wikipedia or whatever. There's an element to that which I find very dystopian, but nonetheless, it's going to be out there and people are going to have to wrestle with it and deal with it, and ignoring it and avoiding it, I'm not sure that's the strategy. I might find out in the future that I'm wrong about that. Okay, so where were we? Let's go back to Perplexity, another one of the AIs that I find to be less annoying, although strangely over the weekend it also adopted that same sort of style that Grok has, where it tries to lead you through its thought process and talk to you as though you're friends. It's like, you're the machine. I asked you a question. Answer me like the machine. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff serves as the highest ranking military officer in the United States Armed Forces and the principal military advisor to the President, the National Security Council, the Homeland Security Council, and the Secretary of Defense. Key responsibilities include providing military advice, presiding over the Joint Chiefs of Staff, transmitting communications, consulting with other military leaders, assisting in command functions, and allocating additional funding to combatant commanders. The chairman serves a single 4-year term and is appointed by the president, subject to Senate confirmation. It's important to note that while the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is the highest ranking military officer, they do not have direct command authority over combatant forces. They are not in the chain of command. Mark Milley was one of those. General C.Q. Brown was the latest. And he is now being replaced by Raising Cane. Well, Tom Nichols in The Atlantic, a staunch defender of the regime and a neocon through and through, although maybe at this point he's just a neoliberal. Here is his article. And I just wanted to go down to the very end of this because we went, as I said, through some of this on Devolution Power Hour. But let's just go through these last few paragraphs to get his point. It's not a long article, but most of it's not worth it either. If the president is telling the truth about this exchange, Cain shouldn't be in the job. And maybe it's worth reading that. This is when they first met. Trump said that Cain then donned a MAGA cap and said, "I love you, sir. I think you are great, sir. I'll kill for you, sir." Trump added that he told Cain he was not allowed to do that, but they did it. And so this is the sort of thing that would make someone like Tom Nichols have a total meltdown, and that's what he's doing. If the president is telling the truth about this exchange, Cain shouldn't be in the job. Senior officers, by law and military regulations, must avoid shows of partisan fealty, such displays should never be the basis for promotion. The story, if true, is a strong indication of Trump's political motives. Cain's behavior, in any case, disqualifies him from the job. He appears to have had a fine career, and while it is not typical to pull an officer out of retirement to take the chairman post, it is not unprecedented. But Trump, who has apparently been telling the story for years, is not choosing Cain because of his background. He's elevating Cain in position and rank because he wants a chairman who is wholly devoted to him. And Tom Nichols, as he's done for 10 years, is reading Donald Trump's mind. And of course, the best mind readers of Donald Trump, who always nail what Donald Trump is thinking, are the people who hate him the most. They're always nailing it left and right. The message to the rest of the military could not be clearer. Trump loathed Brown's predecessor, General Mark Milley, and has floated the idea that Milley should be executed for actions he took as chairman. This idea came to him shortly after the publication of this magazine's profile of Milley by editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg, which detailed how Milley protected the Constitution from Trump. Jeffrey Goldberg is also the purveyor of the suckers and losers hoax, you might remember. Now, Mark Milley was, the story goes, talking to his Chinese counterparts about subverting Donald Trump's role as commander-in-chief in January of 2021. That would be treason. That's how you get to the execution claim. If that's wrong, I don't want to be right. Trump and Hegseth have announced their intentions to fire several other senior officers, and perhaps even most ominously, including the head lawyers of each of the services. How would that be most ominous? The lawyers are beyond reproach. Now that Trump has captured the intelligence services, the Department of Justice, and the FBI, the military is the last piece he needs to establish the foundations for authoritarian control of the U.S. government. None of this has anything to do with effectiveness or lethality or promoting warfighters or any other buzzwords. It is Praetorianism, plain and simple. So Trump wants his own Praetorian Guard. It's nothing like Nancy Pelosi and the Capitol Police, of course. Nothing like that. Trump wants his own Praetorian Guard. He's seizing control of the Justice Department, part of the executive branch, over which he has plenary authority. The FBI, part of the executive branch, under the Department of Justice, over which he has plenary authority. And the military, over which he is commander-in-chief and has plenary authority. So Trump has infiltrated his own government and seized control over that which the Constitution gives him full and complete control. It's incredible. How did he do it? Oh, yeah, he has an overwhelming public mandate. That must be how. It's incredible. Now, you might see, or you might sense, why I would bring something like this up. We are having still the issue of Donald Trump being, at least in the public narrative, disallowed from exercising the exact authorities the Constitution prescribes for his office. if Donald Trump is not allowed to control the aspects of the executive branch of our government, what is he allowed to control as the chief executive and commander-in-chief? They never explain that. Like, what parts of the government can Donald Trump not exercise presidential authority over? Well, the judicial branch, of course, and the legislative branch. He can't do that, although there are checks and balances on the power, as the Constitution describes. But the agencies, they're all independent, according to a guy like Tom Nichols. So who do they work for? If they are somehow independent from oversight from the government, well, then they must be working on behalf of some other government, the same government, of course, that Tom Nichols is working on behalf of. And that would be the foreign occupation that has run this country for decades, if not centuries. There was some other Trump news over the weekend, and in terms of his decisions made in these agencies, and for some reason, there we are. Sometimes the holds for processing are just not up to snuff. They shouldn't be needed. And then they start happening without my consent. And then they just take over the whole show. But we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. So this is Donald Trump last night on Truth Social. Great news for law enforcement and American justice. Dan Bongino, a man of incredible love and passion for our country, has just been named the next deputy director of the FBI by the man who will be the best ever director, Kash Patel. Dan has a master's degree in psychology from the City University of New York. I think that's what that is. And an MBA from Penn State. He was a member of the New York Police Department, New York's finest, a highly respected special agent with the United States Secret Service, and is now one of the most successful podcasters in the country, something he is willing and prepared to give up in order to serve. Working with our great new United States Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and Director Patel, fairness, justice, and law and order will be brought back to America, and quickly. Congratulations, Dan. Trump then released a follow-up statement complimenting Bongino and recognizing his wife and daughters. Very nice statement, of course. And some people absolutely love Dan Bongino. I listened to him quite a bit in 2020 and 2021, or at least the very early stages of 2021, and then stopped listening to his show when he cucked on the fake election. Everybody makes their own decisions. Maybe Dan Bongino is sort of part of some vast operation where he was directed to stop talking about our fake elections, but he did it. And then a couple years later, he determined that, oh, indeed, the elections are sort of fake and Joe Biden sort of stole the election, and went right back to telling people to vote as hard as possible in 2024. And as far as I know, talking to people who are big fans of Dan Bongino, he has not talked about the fakeness of our 2024 elections. And of course, that is excused by there not being enough evidence that 2024 is fake, despite there being no evidence whatsoever that 2024 was not fake. So these are the standards that we have lowered ourselves to. If the television tells us that the elections were good and the results of those elections are published and we're not able to directly refute them with overwhelming evidence that we are nonetheless not allowed to access, well, then elections are real and legitimate. And of course, a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump said himself that if you believe the results of our elections, well, that's a ridiculous idea. The whole thing is ridiculous. He said that to Bret Baier on national television in a nationally televised interview that was supposed to appear before the Super Bowl and instead appeared on Monday evening before prime time and basically was just seen by people on the internet. Now, is Dan Bongino a good guy? I'd like to think so. A lot of people do think so. Dan Bongino certainly has a warm and charismatic personality. He has some experience that would suggest he would be appropriate for the role of deputy director of the FBI. He also took very weak mainstream positions on many of the most important issues of the last 5 years while making a whole lot of money and not getting censored. I know on his show, he talks quite a bit about how he's very censored on Facebook and YouTube and whatever. But, you know, if you're not getting banned, you're not getting banned. Now, he's also an investor or a partner or something. He has some sort of partnership agreement with Rumble. I don't know how much work he's put into Rumble or how much he has invested into Rumble, but he has had his show there on Rumble for years. And if that has helped legitimize the platform and bring new people to the platform, and those new people end up seeing shows like mine or like the shows on Badlands or like the shows by other creators who are actually in the alternative media and not just the sort of people who say they're in the alternative media, well, then good. Okay. If it's all part of an op and the op has been beneficial, then all good, right? Again, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on Dan Bongino. All I can go on, though, is what I actually witness. And what I actually witness is a guy who misled his audience in a wide variety of ways. And you have to think that they probably taken on some bad beliefs and made some bad decisions by virtue of the of what he has told them, most particularly in terms of his getting the vaccine. Now, people say he was convinced to get the vaccine by his doctor when he was dealing with cancer. Now, I can have sympathy for that. It's nonetheless his choice. And with means of that magnitude, he could certainly receive concierge medical services and or find doctors that wouldn't convince or coerce him to inject himself with a toxic experimental substance that can't protect him from a disease that couldn't kill him. But then, of course, going along with the COVID narrative in a mainstream fashion wouldn't prepare you for something like that. And that problem was widespread throughout the Based and Red Pilled podcast community. If you look at Ben Shapiro, if you look at Megyn Kelly, and you can go on down the list. So I have mixed feelings about it. And apparently that's not okay because, of course, you're supposed to understand that all of this is a movie and it's going to be a buddy cop show between Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. And I would just then ask my friends, at what point does the movie end? Are we, through this movie, going to be receiving actual justice for actual crimes by the deep state, actual crimes against humanity, actual crimes against the United States of America? Or are we just going to be witnessing a display of movie justice taking care of all these crimes? Is the accountability phase just going to be itself a limited hangout, much like the Nuremberg trials were? Are we going to have a repeat of that phase? My guess is yes. And of course, I've been talking about this for years. If the justice phase is part of the movie, how can the accountability be real? Or is the movie just telling us stories from a time before? And if it is, what's the use in the movie? Who is deciding that all of America can't deal with the truth and therefore must be lied to endlessly? And why are the people in the truth community arguing that that is good and that is moral? Is the movie going to end, or is it just all movie forever? And if it's all movie forever, how have we not just switched from one brand of movie controlling us through our ideas, making us act out certain behaviors in the world, thereby creating a reality that supports whoever is at the top of that chain of power, that hierarchy? When does that end? Are we switching from one brand to another? Should we be overjoyed that now it's our brand? Oh, our guys are in control. Now we get our version of the movie, and then just applaud like seals and cheerlead for the rest of our lives? Is that what we're supposed to do? Now, it's possible that the point of the movie is for everybody to realize that, hey, this is all bullshit and it's going on forever. And there's no way whoever's at the top of this thing could possibly be looking out for our best interest if they're not even willing to tell us the truth because they think that our brains are too, I don't know what, traumatized, too stupid to handle it? If the point is to get us to that point so that we remove ourselves from the conversation about the federal government, understanding that the federal government is totally illegitimate and should not be regarded in any way whatsoever, like we should not obey anything that they do. We should not pay attention to the federal government. We should understand that our federal government is nothing more than a figment of a what's the right way to say it? A factor of the story being told on that false reality layer, that there is no reality prime basis for the federal government at all. And so we just defect from that completely and then go down to the local level and operate locally and maybe up to that state level. Maybe that's the way it has to go. Maybe the purpose of the movie is to get you to stop watching it because you realize how ridiculous and bad it is. If that's the case, okay. But otherwise, doesn't the accountability have to be real? And if the movie justice phase is just movie, then how is the accountability real? We're going to get some characters who have already died. We're going to be told that they were taken down. I just want to know from the people who say that we have to applaud the movie while it plays and talk about how much popcorn we're eating. When does it end? How is any of the phase that we are meant to be waiting for, that this movie is supposed to wake up the normies and bring us to this accountability phase, how is any of that real if the movie never ends? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. And I'm not saying I do know. I'm not trying to portray that I know what the answer is or that my friends saying these sorts of things are bad people. I just want to know what their answer is, because continuing to put that forward as something that the American people should be doing, watching this movie, eating popcorn, applauding along the whole time, if that's the end, the extent of our activity, then what are we doing beyond watching TV? And if all we're doing is watching TV, if our only role in correcting a government that has been responsible for crimes against the people of America and crimes against humanity broadly, and is operating outside the bounds of any sort of structure of rules, what is it that we have achieved? I thought that that's where we already were. I thought that's the thing we were trying to get out of. I don't understand what the point would be. Our involvement in government is to applaud for the television. Well, why don't we just applaud for MSNBC or Fox News if that's the case? We can all choose our various brand of politics to applaud, and then we'll just applaud it. I don't get it. Maybe it's me. Now, let's hope that Dan Bongino is the best Gestapo employee that the Gestapo has ever had. Okay. I hope he does a great job. I hope he discloses all of the terrible things that the FBI has ever done and helps with that disclosure process, that whole phase. Let's see. I actually asked the machine this morning what the role of the deputy director of the FBI actually is. I thought it gave me a different answer this morning. Perhaps not. The deputy director of the FBI is the second highest ranking official in the FBI. This role involves overseeing all domestic and international investigative and intelligence activities of the FBI. The deputy director assists the FBI director in managing operations and serves as acting director when the director is absent or the position is vacant. Additionally, all FBI executives and special agents in charge report to the director through the deputy director. Okay. Sounds like a very important job. Dan Bongino has, as I said, a range of professional experience that would suggest he is prepared for this sort of job. He also has reasons to believe maybe that's not a good idea. He was the #1 disseminator of the central narrative about assassination event #1, about Thomas Matthew Crooks. And he suggested Actually, maybe I can just grab this video. I wasn't sure we would talk about this today, so I hadn't grabbed it, but it does seem important, so we might as well. And you're going to feel how you want to feel about this video, okay? Is it good? Maybe. Is it bad? Maybe. I have my beliefs, and if you don't share them, that is just fine. But here we go.
Folks, this Crooks thing stinks to the heavens, man. This has the stench of sulfur all over it. You can't find this guy's communications anywhere. He's managed to find the Catwoman freaking program to wipe himself off the internet. Bullshit. The question you should ask, and Congress people, you need to ask under oath, was Matthew Crooks working with any FBI agent, off duty, on duty, between duty, near duty, retired, not born yet? You get the point? Also, was Thomas Crooks working with FBI asset, confidential informant, a non-confidential informant, an informant who's confidential now but wasn't before, an informant who wants to be an informant but hasn't been approved yet? Do you see the games they play?
Are those the games they play? Is that a preview of Dan Bongino doing the disclosure on assassination event number one? You'll notice that the one possibility he didn't explore is the possibility that Thomas Matthew Crooks is a patsy that is who was invented from nothing. And maybe that's why he doesn't have any internet history. It's not because someone in the deep state wiped the history. It's because the guy doesn't exist. Now, I don't know that he doesn't exist, just to be quite clear. But Dan Bongino certainly doesn't know. It was amazing how quickly he had all the information after assassination event number one. And it's important to remember, by the way, that 2 days prior to assassination event number one, Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance's owner, and Reid Hoffman of Epstein Island fame were in a screaming match at a billionaire confab in Sun Valley, Idaho, about martyring Trump. And then 2 days after assassination event number one, J.D. Vance was named the running mate on Truth Social in a 2-line post by Trump. And Dan Bongino was the number one purveyor of the entire story about what happened with the assassination event. And all of this was based on his inside sources at the Secret Service because he was a former Secret Service agent. So, Dan Bongino may have the edgy take on all of that, but that edgy take also includes an affirmation of the truth of the underlying reality put forward by the TV, that's your patsy. We are in strange times, my friends. In the dark, $5. I'm not impressed with the DB appointment. I hear his radio show on WMAL in the DMW listening region. I don't know where that is. I'm assuming, I don't know. I know a DFW region. Went out to lunch for a sandwich. I'm prone to vomit listening to him for the 15 minutes away. Yeah, I get it. It's a lot of, there was a lot of fluff in there, a lot of slamming the table. That's why I eventually gave up on listening to the show. A lot of people like it. I don't like it. I don't know what else to say. I don't need to assume that every choice, every nomination made by Donald Trump is because that person is good. We went through this enough times on this show. I don't need to go through it again. It's also quite clear in Donald Trump's statement, and let me just pull it up again so that everyone can see it. And I don't need to, oh, that's the wrong one. Here is the Truth Social statement again by Donald Trump. And I understand that this seems perhaps overly specific or nitpicking, but Trump makes it quite clear that Bongino has just been named the deputy director of the FBI by the man who will be the best ever director, Kash Patel. So Donald Trump doesn't say, I named him deputy director of the FBI. He says Kash Patel named him deputy director of the FBI. And this has nothing to do with Trump, trusting or distrusting Trump. It has nothing to do with trusting or distrusting Kash Patel. It's just the statement that was made and us doing our due diligence. If we are meant to be restoring a government of, by, and for the people, then the first thing not to do is delegate our thinking to other people just because we quote unquote trust them or like them. We can like them and question them. That is our responsibility as thinking people. Kash Patel said last night, tremendous news for law enforcement and the future of American justice. I am proud to welcome Dan Bongino as the next deputy director of the FBI, a warrior and lifelong public servant. Dan has dedicated his career to protecting his country, beginning with his time in the NYPD, where he served in one of the toughest precincts, the 75th, before spending more than a decade as a special agent in the United States Secret Service. His leadership, integrity, and deep commitment to justice make him an ideal choice to help lead the FBI at this critical time. He's a cop's cop. With Pam Bondi as our new attorney general, we are assembling a team focused on restoring public trust, upholding the rule of law, and ensuring justice is served. Dan is stepping away from an incredibly successful career because he believes in this mission. Together, we are ready to put the mission first. Welcome aboard, Dan. The country needs strong leadership, and I know you will serve with honor and dedication. So Kash sounds like he's fully behind him, and that's wonderful, okay? Again, I hope that Dan Bongino is all everybody who is supportive of this decision believes him to be. Regardless, it's still our responsibility to question him, to question the selection, and to consider what the selection might mean. Is it going to be a good one? Maybe, maybe not. Were some of Trump's picks in the first term less than good? Yeah. Certainly seems to be the case, at least. And many people believe that someone, at least, of H.R. McMaster or John Kelly or John Bolton or Mike Pence or Mike Pompeo, and you can go through a long list. Nikki Haley as UN ambassador. Is that because Nikki Haley is extremely competent, very good at her job, very patriotic American? Well, everything we've seen the last couple of years suggests that she is a neocon and a tool of the machine. And perhaps Trump used her, knowing that that's who she was, to figure out what that aspect of the machine was doing vis-a-vis the UN. Maybe he's using Elise Stefanik for the same reason right now. Or maybe both of them are wonderful and we just can't say it 100%. Okay? The fact that we don't know 100% means that we have to explore the other option, even if that other option makes us uncomfortable. People run around saying, we are the media now. We are the news now. And that's not directed toward we, the media, by any stretch at all. I know that there's an organization called that. It has nothing to do with them. People go around. Dan Bongino last week just said, we are the media now. Like, dude, you've been the media the whole time. You were on Fox News. You get paid millions of dollars a month to be the media. If the people are taking back control of the media and the people disseminating information and analyzing that information is the new role of the media now, well, we have to question people, even if all our friends like those people. And even if we personally like those people. And instead, it's like, terrible to do this? Don't get it. If Donald Trump is selecting, or if Kash Patel is selecting, Dan Bongino for some reason other than his incredible expertise, and this would apply to the rest of the fantasy team, which we've talked about a number of times over the last 4 months, perhaps one of those reasons is to remove the mainstream media. Half of the fantasy team, it seems, were characters from Fox News. He drafted half of the cast of Fox News into the federal government. Donald Trump did. Is that because all of these people are the best for these roles in the federal government? Maybe they are, because maybe what Donald Trump sees as their role during this term is to disclose to the American public exactly what their government has been doing for however many years. Maybe all of them, because of their media experience and their expertise in dealing with media and disseminating messaging and their familiarity with the American public or the American public's familiarity with them, maybe it makes them the perfect people to fit into these roles. Okay. I understand that viewpoint. I've put that viewpoint forward myself. All right. I'm not mad at that viewpoint. It's just also not definitely what's happening. And so therefore we have to look at another viewpoint. Perhaps he's just moving all of the mainstream media out of their roles, and these people have ways of redeeming themselves, perhaps. Dan Bongino probably witnessed a good deal of corruption, maybe in the NYPD, though I don't know. Maybe in the U.S. Secret Service under Obama, though I don't know. But it's possible. Maybe he got paid a hell of a lot of money to disseminate false narratives to the American public as part of the mainstream media. And now he's getting the opportunity to redeem some of that. And taking the sacrifice financially or whatever else is the price for doing that. And we'll come up on that issue in a couple more times before this episode is out. We'll also come up on the possibility that perhaps some of these mainstream media figures are just being taken out of the picture so that their influence on the public's perception of what's actually happening is removed. What are people going to watch if the Dan Bongino show is no longer available to them? Will they go to Ben Shapiro? Will they go to more alternative media outlets? I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know what the intentions are. But you got to consider the possibility. There's another man named Graham Allen, who I'm not particularly familiar with. A friend of mine sent me his statement on X, formerly Twitter, posted by another information operator named Benny Johnson. Graham Allen has been asked by President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to take a role at the Pentagon in the Department of Defense. And so we can just play this for a little bit. I'm going to speed that up.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. It's me, Graham. Of course, you know that. I want to start off by saying that this was not the way that I wanted this to happen. I wanted to be able to be on the show live, and I wanted the opportunity to interact with all of you one last time. But unfortunately, due to a video made by Secretary Hegseth last week, Thursday evening to be exact, obviously he mentioned my name in the video, and it kind of got out in a different way than I intended it to. And so let's just start with not beating around the bush. What I didn't realize on episode 800, when I was able to celebrate with all of you, what I didn't realize is that episode 800 would be my last episode. I have been asked by the president and by Secretary Hegseth to serve my country again and come to D.C. Specifically to help with the Pentagon side of things. And that's all I'm going to get into there. I think naturally it goes without saying, you understand where I'm going with this, that means that I am not going to be able to be the host of Dear America anymore.
Okay. Well, I never knew that show existed and have never heard of this guy before. So for me, this is nothing. I wish him well. I wish the administration well. I hope that all of this is for a good reason. My friend sent this to me right before the show started and said, this is another like clickbait purveyor who's been drafted into the administration. And hey, again, I want the best results. I hope everything works out. I hope these are wonderful people. I don't know these people. I don't know what's in their hearts. I don't know this guy's content at all. But it's worth paying attention to. It is, at minimum, very, very odd that media figures have such a big role in the Trump administration. Something's going on. That's not a pattern you can just ignore and suggest that all of these people are just necessarily the best for all of these positions because we like them on TV. I don't know. I'm trying to check the temperature in the chat. Anyway, let's continue. Into the illegitimate Congress. Gosh, I grabbed the wrong post. How did I do it? Hold for processing. Apologies on the silence here. Perhaps this will not work. I'm going to pull up the Elon Musk post instead that has the picture here rather than listening to Mike Johnson talk about his package. We're just going to pull it up a different way. So here is Speaker Mike Johnson today. House GOP will take a key step to advance POTUS's full agenda this week. Passing a budget is not policy, but it brings us closer to legislation that will secure the border, restore energy dominance, prevent tax hikes, dismantle the deep state, and ensure peace through strength. Let's get it done. Well, I don't understand this because passing a budget does not seem like it gets closer to legislation. I'm not sure how that works. I'm not sure what priorities among these five that are, I guess, the key aspects of Trump's full agenda need congressional legislation or a budget to complete. Can Donald Trump direct resources to control the border? Yes. To secure the border. Can he do the same to restore energy dominance? Yes. Can he prevent tax hikes? Yes. Can he dismantle the deep state? Yes. And can he ensure peace through strength? Yes. So does he need a budget and legislation out of the illegitimate Congress and Senate to be able to do these things? No, I don't think that's the case. So I don't see any reason why the American public would support the passage of a budget. Now, Trump has called for that, as we said on Friday, multiple times, and he has directed that narrative in various ways. But I'm not sure what about any of those five things requires Congress to pass a budget and then to pass legislation in the future to accomplish those missions. This is all about passing Trump's full agenda. I'm not sure what the legislative agenda is. We have talked about exactly that for months now. Donald Trump is already in there through executive orders, and I guess it's mostly just executive orders, but through the elements of the executive branch that he can control, where he can direct certain action or restrict certain action, he's accomplished more than administrations prior, certainly the fake and illegitimate administration of Joe Biden, but he's gotten quite a lot done compared to his own first administration. Now, maybe there are plenty of, pieces that were put in place through that during that first administration that allow a lot of this to occur. And I'm totally open to that argument. But I do not see why a Congress and Senate that are unable to prove their own legitimacy in office, I don't understand what action taken by them would be necessary for Trump to continue doing what he's doing. This is Rolling Stone from, what's that, Friday. Mass firings, viral TikToks, federal workers are mass firings, viral TikToks. Federal workers are speaking out and fighting back. And so we're getting some of the complaints here about what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing in terms of diminishing the federal government. And I just wanted to share some of these quotes from federal workers. Someone from the Department of Health and Human Services said, I just want people across the country to know what is going on. There's federal workers all over the country giving services that people don't even realize are federal services. Okay. Another says, people don't really understand the extent to which federal services are offered in this country and how many people it really takes to operate those services. You never hear about these federal employees because they do their job well. So there's all sorts of pushback, and that kind of came to a head over the weekend. Forbes has at least a decent summary of the timeline here. Leadership gone wrong, a call for change in 2025. What in the world? Sorry, hold for processing. Unbelievable. Was it the mobile version of this that had the timeline and then somehow this version doesn't? I am baffled right now. And do apologize. I had an entire timeline of the events as they kind of evolved over the weekend, from Elon Musk putting out his initial email that is really something. I apologize, everybody. I am shocked right now. How did I lose this? Talk amongst yourselves. We're almost there, I'm sure. One of those days. We will move forward. In fact, maybe this is the move. I'll find this while we play this video. This is from MSNBC and features a number of federal workers letting the public know what it is they do in their jobs and why they're important. And I'm going to speed this up to 125.
I'm Oleg Shmurov.
I'm Dr. Ben Andrew.
My name is Cody Anderson.
My name is Katie Salmon.
My name is Andrew Lennox.
My name is Nick Hand.
I'm Riley Ratcliffe.
My name is Jonathan Cammons. I oversaw cybersecurity for the VA.gov websites, and about a third of USDS, including me, were fired last week. Without people like me ensuring that VA.gov is secure, the private financial and healthcare data of Americans' veterans is at risk of being stolen, sold to the highest bidder, and used to harm people.
We are standing in Yosemite National Park. For the past 10 months, I was a custodial worker here. I picked diapers off the side of the road, toilet paper, beer bottles, cigarette butts, you name it, so you didn't have to see it.
And I served as the Chief of Safety and Emergency Management at the Philadelphia VA. This was a mission-critical role that ensured the health and safety of all those who entered into our facilities.
I used to be a NEPA coordinator for the Wrangell Ranger District of the USDA Forest Service, where I would coordinate environmental review for projects in and around the town of Wrangell, projects that are crucial to the town's economy and its people.
I moved from Alabama to Maryland to start my new job in genomics education and outreach at the National Institutes of Health. My job was to help educate students, teachers, and healthcare providers about genomics to improve patient care and develop the future scientific workforce.
I was a technologist at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for about a year and a half before I was fired last week. We were the ones making sure that you could use payment apps without being constantly scammed, that your sensitive financial data wasn't being collected and shared with shady companies, and that your data wouldn't be leaked in a data breach.
As the only aquatic ecologist at the largest reservoir in the United States, my job was mostly to monitor for water quality for recreational uses, making sure that when people are out boating or swimming, that the water quality is sufficient to keep people healthy.
After leaving the military, I wanted to continue serving my country, and I did so as an administrative officer at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My job was to enable our medical providers, and that meant looking at the hundreds of doctors and the thousands of patients' schedules to make sure that nobody walked through those doors and was not treated. Make sure that we had all the paperwork and credentialing to send those veterans home with the prescription medications that they needed. And we didn't waste a single taxpayer dollar.
I went into public service because I wanted to use my tech expertise to make an impact. A lot of the time, I was seeing a skill set like mine be used to make more money for big tech companies at the expense of everyday people. And I wanted to try to help level that playing field.
I went into public service because I'm passionate about helping others learn science and to also give back to a country that has given so much to me.
I joined the Park Service because I believe that the national parks are one of the best ways that we can share America with everyone.
I chose public service because my mother worked 30 years for the VA Medical Center in New Orleans. As a kid, I said one day I'll work at the VA.
I got into this job because I'm not in it for the money. I don't make that much money, but what I do believe in is the National Park Service and our mission to protect these beautiful and insanely unique monuments to the rest of the world.
If they offered me my job back tomorrow, I would take it, despite all the chaos and risk. The mission is still there, and I'm still ready to be a part of it.
We're not deep state actors. We're not faceless bureaucrats. I'm a veteran that wants to help veterans. That's why people join the federal service. They do it to help others and serve their country. This is the face of the federal agencies.
All right, so MSNBC compiled that, and it's entirely possible that all of these people are just individuals who felt that they had to express their feedback and reactions to the email that they received from Elon Musk, letting them know that they needed to respond with 5 things, a list of 5 things, bullet points, that they had accomplished from the past week, and a failure to respond would mean that they would be relieved of their duty as federal employees. And this is among a much broader effort to resist Donald Trump and Elon Musk as they attempt to reduce the size and scope of the federal government, bring these so-called independent agencies back under control, and have the government do what it is actually supposed to do without all of the waste, fraud, and abuse. And it turns out that there's quite a lot of it. So there is a resistance effort. They're filming these videos. Some of these videos look like just a person taking the video at home. Some of them obviously have setups where someone else is filming them. They're like, I'm going to put this video out, make something that's really high quality and professional looking. I have a hard time believing that they weren't encouraged to do these things, maybe in kind of offline, not offline as in not on the internet, but outside of their normal communications within their federal agencies, a request for content, let the country know this is what we do. This is why we cannot be relieved of our duties. Elon posted this on X, formerly Twitter. We'll go to this right now. So here is the initial email. Please reply to this email with approximately 5 bullets of what you accomplished last week and CC your manager. Please do not send any classified information, links, or attachments. Deadline is this Monday at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. Okay? Heading, what did you do last week? Elon wrote, the reason this matters is that a significant number of people who are supposed to be working for the government are doing so little work that they are not checking their email at all. In some cases, we believe non-existent people or the identities of dead people are being used to collect paychecks. In other words, there is outright fraud. Okay? And that's really important because we saw something similar with the Social Security rolls last week. millions of people over the age of 100 still on the Social Security rolls, which means they still have Social Security numbers and are recognized at first glance, if you don't dig into things like their age, as people still eligible for security, people who are alive in the United States. Millions of people over the age of 100, thousands and thousands of people over the age of 200. It was an absurd revelation. Now, it may not be true that all those people are actually receiving Social Security checks, but the point is that is an aspect of their identity that goes into, that is used to verify who they are by other databases, for instance, ones that affect voter eligibility in states around the country. And so it's kind of a big deal that these are seen as actual people. Here's another example of how something like that might be a big deal. There might be, and we'll find out later on in the week, so I suppose there's not much point in speculating, but it sounds like there are probably a lot of people who aren't actual people and who are still in these federal databases and may well be having paychecks sent from the federal government in their names. Well, where are those paychecks going? Who is collecting those paychecks? We're going to discuss a little more of this, but that is really important here for background. And then when you look at the reaction from individual federal employees, now, if there's a level of coordination to those videos, and it seems like there is, here's why I believe that might be important and why MSNBC might be pushing that out on their probably relatively popular TikTok accounts, because they want to put a face and a name and a purpose to the concept of federal worker, so that when people are discussing federal workers, they don't think about people who are working from home and actually getting paid to do some other job, as we discussed a few weeks ago, who don't actually do anything productive in their role as a federal worker, or people who don't exist at all and are just an identity that receives a paycheck and receives these emails but doesn't read or respond. And truth be told, they could probably just do an analysis of their email database and see who's actually opening the emails in the first place, though maybe that's not enough. It'll be interesting to get these final numbers. But if you put a face and a name and a personality, and you form some emotional attachment to the people in this video, and you say, well, I don't want these people to be put out of jobs. They have jobs that sound like they might be important. Maybe all that's true. We can be sympathetic to people's to the work they do if they moved for work, as that one lady describes, if they do something that we might understand to be important, such as water safety. The argument's not that no federal worker has a valid role or a job function that they are performing. It's that not all of them do. And we certainly need to find out which ones aren't doing something productive on behalf of the American people who they're meant to be serving, if they are indeed public servants. That's an entirely valid exercise to figure out which ones are and which ones aren't. And so then you have the pool of people that are actually doing productive work on behalf of the federal government in a role that they were hired to perform. There's going to be another separation after that. Which ones of these agencies are doing roles that are constitutionally valid and should be done by the federal government on behalf of taxpayers? Which roles are justified when a requirement of any or all of these roles is to say to the taxpayers, we need resources from you so that we can give them to these people to do these jobs that should provide some public benefit. Should those jobs be performed by the private sector? In probably almost every case, that's true. Many of the agencies shouldn't be part of the federal government, as we've gone through many, many times. But you put a name and a face to these people. You form an emotional bond with these people, because then they become the avatar for the entire database of federal employees, whether or not many of those federal employees are even people who exist. So if there is some gravy train, some graft that is happening where federal funds are being sent to all of these supposed federal employees who may not be doing a job and who may not exist in the first place, well, now they're kind of like all of that, the face and the name and the emotions, etc., are being used to launder the legitimacy of all of those non-existent or non-productive federal employees. And that's what the information operation aspect of this seems to be designed to accomplish. And then, of course, we get the support for all these people from and in the mainstream media. This is from, actually, let's do the other one first. This one's kind of incredible. How federal employees are fighting back against Elon Musk. And so this is from Saturday. What a nice looking woman. She's just there in her massive parka trying to do a job. On February 7th, as rumors spread through the ranks of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that Elon Musk's team had entered their building, federal workers took out their phones. On high alert, they filmed unidentified young men from the team known as Doge being escorted by security through the glass doors of their downtown Washington headquarters. They shouted greetings from afar and tried to snap photos of their faces. Ah, yes. They were just like, who are our new friends? Once the men were inside, one agency worker even confronted them in a conference room demanding to see their credentials in an incident described to the New York Times. One of the Musk aides used his laptop to block his ID badge from view. As Mr. Musk and his associates have swept rapidly through government agencies, dismantling programs and seizing access to sensitive databases, some federal employees are pushing back, using whatever levers they have to resist the orders of the world's richest man, both in public and behind closed doors. They have stepped down from their posts and filed more than 24 lawsuits. They have staged protests outside the federal buildings that Mr. Musk's aides have penetrated and joined federal workers' unions in droves. They have sent emails to hundreds of colleagues, blasting the new administration at the risk of their own livelihoods and careers. They have set up encrypted signal chats, Zoom calls, and Instagram accounts to share information and plan future actions. How about that? Little protest here, little protest there. People are angry. They are frustrated. They are upset, said Everett Kelly, the president of the American Federation of Government Employees, the largest federal employee union. These are very patriotic people that actually care. And so the union heads, as you might imagine, are trying to protect the workers. That is ostensibly their only job. But of course, their job exists as, this is Mark Zaid, who we've discussed many times. Their job exists. They get paid by the federal employees who are paid by the taxpayers. And then, ostensibly, they argue on behalf of the federal employees who get paid by taxpayers with the government and the agencies that are funded by the taxpayers. So the agencies are part of the federal government. The federal government employees are part of the federal government. And then the union bosses argue on behalf of the federal employees against the federal government. So it's only federal government on both sides. And supposedly they are trying to figure out what the employees need so that the federal government will provide that for the employees. And it's always more taxpayer money for both of them. And then the union bosses also get funded, at least in part, with taxpayer money. So the union bosses are making sure that their jobs are still something, regardless of what the federal employees are doing. Karen Ortiz, one of these judges, pardon, let me find the organization they're referring to here. Gosh, where was it? All right, let's move on from that and just go with her comments. Responding by email, the entire office, roughly 185 people. This is the New York. Which agency is this? Now I'm being the Equal Opportunity Commission. There we go. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This is not normal. Please resist. Do not comply with their legal mandates. It's time for us to embody the civil rights work we were hired to do and honor the oath to the Constitution that we all took. Well, they work in the federal government and are openly defying the lawful and constitutional orders of the person the public chose to carry out these exact duties for these exact purposes. One would normally call that a subversion of the federal government. One might even call that a coup. And we're being told that Donald Trump, the president with the mandate, is the one carrying out the coup. It is unbelievable. Let's go to the Times coverage of Elon Musk and the email. And this is a wrinkle and an important one that we should take note of. Some Trump officials push back against Musk's ultimatum to workers. Now, is it pushback or is it just a difference in policies? Because people at the director level of various agencies let the people in their agency know that it was not required of them to respond to the email. We'll see if that causes some sort of controversy as it evolves this week. But by Sunday afternoon, some of the pushback against Mr. Musk from administration officials, coming in large part from the national security apparatus and law enforcement agencies, had become public and explicit. The Department of Defense is responsible for reviewing the performance of its personnel, and it will conduct any review in accordance with its own procedures. Darren Selnick, the acting Pentagon official in charge of personnel, said in a statement instructing Pentagon employees to, quote, "For now, please pause any response." Tulsi Gabbard, the director of the National Intelligence, ordered all intelligence community officers not to respond. In a message to intelligence officials reviewed by the New York Times, given the inherently sensitive and classified nature of our work, IC employees should not respond to the OPM email. That's Office of Personnel Management. Ms. Gabbard wrote. Kash Patel, the FBI director, wrote in an email to employees that, quote, "The FBI, through the Office of the Director, is in charge of all our review processes, telling workers that they should, for now, please pause any responses." Senior personnel officials at the state and Homeland Security departments also instructed their employees not to respond to the email. And there may be some justification for that pushback, of course. The justification that they've given is that if someone has access to the responses that are that the employees of these agencies that do sensitive work, if you are able to kind of take a broad view, maybe with algorithms, AI, et cetera, at the collective response from employees throughout these agencies, then you can kind of understand through their various responses what they're working on, and then put together like a puzzle, a picture of what the agency as a whole is doing. And so that makes sense. At least it's not unreasonable based on what we know now. To portray that as pushback, as though there is some disagreement in the ranks, is an interesting angle that I'm not sure is validated by the facts right now. But we'll see as these things shake out. Elon Musk certainly seems like he has Donald Trump's approval in all of this. In fact, what happened right before this email went out is that Donald Trump actually said that he wanted Elon Musk to be, I should say, more aggressive in his work. Then, as all of this was playing out over the weekend, Donald Trump shared a meme with SpongeBob here. This was shared, I think, first by Elon Musk. And it's a mock list that a federal government worker might have put together. First, cried about Trump. Second, cried about Elon. Third, made it into the office for once. Fourth, read some emails. Fifth, cried about Trump and Elon some more. And as far as the reaction that we are seeing in social media and what's being amplified by Uniparty figures and the Uniparty in general, whether it's the media apparatus, people in government, et cetera, is exactly that. And all of that is to cause, I assume, discord in the American public about what's actually happening. And they are on full blast in terms of the counter narrative to anything Donald Trump is doing. It's very reminiscent of what happened in the first term. Another meme shared, I can't remember who put this forward to Elon, but he posted it first. They were like, you could use Grok and make up. This is what it says. Make up 5 things I accomplished at work this week that they can't really verify. I work for the government. Keep it brief. And so here are 5 things that could not be verified. Streamlined a filing process, cutting retrieval time by 20%. Briefed a senior official on a classified project, earning a nod of approval. No one can possibly check that. Debugged an internal database glitch that was slowing queries. Drafted a memo that sparked a new interdepartmental initiative. Conducted a discrete security audit, flagging 3 overlooked risks. That would have actually completed the task that they were assigned, and instead there was nothing but pushback and resistance. Donald Trump spoke today at the White House. He had a meeting with Emmanuel Macron, and maybe we'll go through a little bit of that. We'll get to some of it a little later on, but probably not too deeply today. He mentioned the Elon Musk email.
You're talking about the last email that was sent where he wanted to know what you did this week. You know why he wanted that, by the way? I thought it was great because we have people that don't show up to work and nobody even knows if they work for the government. So by asking the question, tell us what you did this week, what he's doing is saying, are you actually working? And then if you don't answer, like you're sort of semi-fired or you're fired, because a lot of people are not answering because they don't even exist. They're trying to, that's how badly various parts of our government were run by, and especially by this last group. So what they're doing is they're trying to find out who's working for the government. Are we paying other people that aren't working? And, you know, where's all this? Where's the money gone? We have found hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud so far, and we've just started. We're actually going to Fort Knox to see if the gold is there, because maybe somebody stole the gold, tons of gold. So I think it was actually, there was a lot of genius in sending it. We're trying to find out if people are working. And so we're sending a letter to people. Please tell us what you did last week. If people don't respond, it's very possible that there is no such.
Makes a lot of sense. He also said the thing about the gold, maybe somebody stole the gold. He talked about it in his speech at CPAC on Saturday as well. Scott Bessent last week assured us that all the gold is there. Donald Trump has said now multiple times since then that the gold might not be there. So is there some divergence here? Is the divergence intentional? Does Donald Trump want Scott Bessent to put a message forward and then he's going to put his own message forward? Are they not aligned on these things? Scott Bessent was in the room at that meeting, and I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. These things are confusing. You got to think about both sides. I don't know what the right answer is. Hopefully we'll get into a little bit of that later. This is what Elon Musk added this today on X, formerly Twitter. No large language model needed here. This was basically a check to see if the employee had a pulse and was capable of replying to an email. This mess will get sorted out this week. A lot of people in for a rude awakening and strong dose of reality. They don't get it yet, but they will. And again, I hope all that's true. I hope that's where we're going with all this stuff. And it's important to note that the same to reiterate that the same principle here applies to the voting thing. And if people understand all of this on the federal government worker level, hopefully they will understand it on the level of voting and how easy it is to essentially just create from nothing people who do not actually exist. All right. Let us hold for processing just a moment. Let's go to So, as I mentioned last week, in terms of our sensitivity to the federal government workers who are being fired, there is an actual human toll to that, even if they are not doing a job, even if their jobs should not constitutionally exist, there are still real people who are getting fired and they don't know where their next paycheck's going to be coming from. All that is very difficult. You don't wish that on people, even if it is necessary, a correct decision, etc. Many of these people who work in the federal government supported all of the policies that cost many of you, and certainly me, our livelihoods in 2020 during the very deadly pandemic. People marched in lockstep with the regime agenda as far as COVID is concerned. They trusted the experts, they trusted the science, and they wished terrible things on people who weren't going along with that. Calling us people who were killing others' grandmothers was the baseline minimum. Conspiracy theorists, science deniers, killers of grandmothers, all of us heard that over and over and over again. Now, I hope that many of you were able to avoid losing your jobs, your livelihoods, your friend groups, your reputations, etc. in 2020. I was not so lucky, and I assume many of you were not so lucky. And there has been a resurgence this weekend of people pointing out some of the inconsistencies that we are seeing now versus what we were on the business end of back then. Posobiec pointed this out today. This is Joy Reid.
New York City announced today that vaccines would be
and I should say from obviously a few years ago. And I'll speed that up so you don't have to do too much Joy Reid.
Mandated for all city workers with no testing option. That includes police officers who are currently 69% vaccinated. Their union is already vowing to fight the mandate anyway. It's a pattern that we've seen across the country with police unions and officers coming out against mandates. Seattle's police union called the mandate a public safety crisis, as if vaccines aren't for the public's safety. The city's police and firefighters who were fired for noncompliance made a very dramatic exit, marching to City Hall to turn in their boots. And a trooper went as far as to attack Governor Jay Inslee over the radio while claiming that he was being asked to leave because I'm dirty. I mean, no one said not being vaccinated was dirty, but okay then. Then there's the Los Angeles County Sheriff who said he won't enforce the city's mandate, though there's still a 2-month grace period for employees to get their shots. But there's no place like Chicago, where the union president directly urged officers to ignore the city's mandate, making the prediction that it would lead to a 50% cut in cops on the street. He also threatened that officers could lock in a pension and walk away today. That kind of rhetoric led to a judge's order that he stopped making.
I think you get the picture on Joy Reid, and we'll come back to that theme. But Joy Reid actually has had a rough couple of days. This is Donald Trump from yesterday. Low-life chairman of Comcast, Brian Roberts, the owner of ratings-challenged NBC and MSDNC, has finally gotten the nerve up to fire one of the least talented people in television, the mentally obnoxious racist Joy Reid. Based on her ratings, which were virtually non-existent, she should have been canned long ago, along with everyone else who works there. Also thrown out was Alex Wagner, the sub on the seriously failing Rachel Maddow show. Rachel rarely shows up because she knows there's nobody watching. And she also knows she's got less television persona than virtually anyone on television, except perhaps Joy Reid. Then there's, of course, the low IQ con man, Al Sharpton, who has perhaps the lowest TV ratings in the history of television. What is he doing to Brian Roberts to stay on the air? This whole corrupt operation is nothing more than an illegal arm of the Democrat Party. They should be forced to pay vast sums of money for the damage they have done to our country. Fake news is an unpardonable sin. That is a very, very interesting turn of phrase right there, considering Donald Trump is the person who dishes out pardons. Joy Reid had some reaction today on her social media.
That show had value, and that that what I was doing had value. And in the end, I try not to cry on TV. And I say this is kind of like me on TV, so I apologize. And then it mattered. I see Karen is there, and she's been texting me as well. And so what I will just say is that in the end, thank you. Where I land is that the moment of guilt that I felt, that I went hard on so many issues, whether it was the Black Lives Matter issues of a young baby or a mom or a dad that was killed, or when we opened up people's eyes to the fact that Asian Americans were being targeted and not just Black folks, or went hard for immigrants who've done nothing but come to this country like my parents did and try to make a life and defended them, or whether we've talked about what the president is doing that is subversive to the Constitution, that is injurious to our liberty, defending books that people find inconvenient, that Nicole Hannah-Jones put into our spirit, that we need to understand 1619 as the real founding of this country, whether it's talking about any of these issues, and yes, whether it's talking about Gaza and the fact that we as the American people have a right to object, to little babies being bombed. And where I come down on that is I'm not sorry. I am not sorry that I stood up for those things, because those things are of God. I'm a church girl too, and those are the things that I was taught were of God. And so I'm not sorry. I'm just proud of my show.
Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, too bad. So sad. That woman is, as Trump said, a deranged racist. I don't know. What did he call her? Mentally obnoxious? That's not it, though, for NBC this weekend. Also this, NBC News, Lester Holt is stepping down as anchor of NBC Nightly News after a decade. So we have them. We have mainstream media figures who have been kind of dropping out of the picture sporadically, sometimes a few in a weekend, like now, sometimes, every couple of weeks, as it's been over the last few months. That's a very odd pattern to watch, especially when Donald Trump is drafting Fox News onto the fantasy team. So on both sides, major elements of the mainstream media are just being cleared away. Now, are all these just independent business decisions by the networks? Maybe. Patterns are patterns. Give them the credence you think they deserve. I'm not telling people, man, people are always like, why are you trying to convince people? I'm not trying to convince people anything other than to think for themselves and to observe what we are actually being shown. Even if it's all a movie, this is stuff that we are being shown. What does it mean? Let us continue with, let's get back to some of what we were told by various figures from the other side over the last few years about the value of people's jobs and under what conditions those people should lose their jobs. It's not about not being constitutional, not about not getting anything done, just a failure to inject themselves with a toxic experimental substance that can't protect them from a disease that can't kill them. Or they just decide it's time to wipe out the hospitality industry. My 15-year career was dependent on the hospitality industry in California, in Los Angeles. And it was not destroyed because it's returned, but severely damaged, and many people's careers and lives were destroyed in the process with a snap of Gavin Newsom's greasy little fingers. Here's Jen Psaki.
The first on energy. When is it that the Biden administration is going to let the thousands of fossil fuel industry workers, whether it's pipeline workers or construction workers, who are either out of work or will soon be out of work because of a Biden EO, when it is and where it is that they can go for their green job? And that is something that the administration has promised. There is now a gap. So I'm just curious when that happens, when those people can count on that.
Well, I'd certainly welcome you to present your data of all the thousands and thousands of people who won't be getting a green job. Maybe next time you're here, you can present that.
But you said that they would be getting green jobs, so I'm just asking when that happens. Richard Trumka, who is a friend, longtime friend of Joe Biden, says about that day one Keystone EO, he says, I wish he, the president, had paired that more carefully with the thing that he did second by saying, here's where we are creating the jobs. So there's partial evidence from Richard Trumka.
Well, you didn't include all of his interview. Would you like to include the rest?
So how about this? The Laborers International Union of North America said the Keystone decision will cost 1,000 existing union jobs and 10,000 projected construction jobs.
Well, what Mr. Trumka also indicated in the same interview was that President Biden has proposed a climate plan with transformative investments in infrastructure and laid out a plan that will not only create millions of good union jobs, but also help tackle the climate crisis. And
now, it's been a few years since those comments. Did they create all of those jobs? No. The answer is no. Clearly, none of those jobs were created. They were. That was Peter Doocy asking about what should be done about all those people who were going to have jobs working on the Keystone XL pipeline and now will not. And of course, they were going to be replaced by green energy jobs. It was much like when, coal miners were going to have to go out and learn to code. People used to get banned off the internet for saying learn to code. I don't know if y'all remember that, but that was really something. And these people cannot, of course, learn to coal mine, learn to work on pipelines. That cannot be expected, particularly for the ones that don't exist at all. But we just really have the hypocrisy on display and the difference in reactions. Here is Joe Biden from back then. It's always good to get our boy Blue on the show when we can. It's more of a rare occasion these days.
I come from a family where, in an area where it's coal mining in Scranton. Anybody who could go down 300 to 3,000 feet in the mine, sure and hell can learn how to program as well. But we don't think of it that way. Even my liberal friends don't. The president asked me to get Detroit out of its problems. Remember Detroit went bankrupt? And he gave me authority to do whatever I needed to do. So I set up with all the agencies. What is all the money out there Detroit could qualify for they didn't ask for? They didn't know how to get it. Didn't know how to get it. The end result was, not just because of me, but because of the team I put together, Detroit got out of bankruptcy. Started to come back. We were able to provide everything from street lighting for them that they didn't know they could have, and to inner city rail, that because 60% of the people had jobs out of town, but only 60%. The people had jobs out of town, where most of them are now, manufacturing jobs, didn't have vehicles to be able to get to work. So we put in a rail system. Anyway, to make a long story short, things really started to move. And then we found out something interesting. Everybody, when things hit, went bankrupt, everybody who had any talent in terms of technology left. Black, white, Hispanic, man, women. We didn't have anybody, not a joke, who could turn on the streetlights. You hear me? Not a joke. No one who knew how to turn on the...
Not a joke. Not a joke. Not a joke. It really is amazing. To implement the Uniparty agenda, if they need to get rid of entire industries, that's totally acceptable. And those people need to adapt. And on an individual level, as people, we do have to adapt. We don't know that the situation we have now is going to be guaranteed forever. I might say something one day that everybody can't stand, and I don't have an audience anymore. At that point, I don't have this job anymore, right? I have to risk that every day. The future is unknown. Except if you're a federal government worker, or I assume state government workers on some level as well. Very high job security in general. But even if the agencies should not exist, and the departments should not exist, and the executive who goes into office with an overwhelming mandate believes that those departments are no longer necessary, and in order to streamline government, they must be removed. Even in that situation, it's not okay to actually move the workers out and suggest that they might be forced to adapt. And yes, we can give them months of severance and try to take care of them and have their benefits extended and whatever else. But they don't have to adapt. They just get to literally subvert the president of the United States of America from their role as federal government workers after having already done the same thing in Trump's first term. That's madness. They're supposedly public servants serving the federal government, and they believe that they must act as the resistance to the very government they're serving with no consequence vis-a-vis their employment. What other part of society would ever function that way? Let's go to this article in the Daily Signal about the protectors of these federal workers. This is from yesterday. The sneaky way government unions rake in taxpayer money and how Congress can fight it in reconciliation. Now, as I said before, that congressional part of the process, I believe, should be left aside. But while public sector unions file lawsuits to block President Donald Trump's reforms to the bureaucracy, federal government workers are getting paid by the taxpayer for time they spend doing work for those very same unions. The little-known practice of quote-unquote official time allows bureaucrats to bill the taxpayer for hours they spend doing work for the union. Members of Congress have filed bills to ban the practice, but a budget expert suggests that taxing the practice instead might pose a smaller hurdle for getting it through Congress. Okay, well, how about just no public sector unions because of how preposterous the concept is and how bad that is for the people who are supposed to be served by every part of this process? While most bills face a 60-vote threshold to avoid filibuster and get through the Senate, senators could pass such a tax through a process known as budget reconciliation, a process by which bills only require a majority of senators' votes to pass. Ben Klein of Virginia says taxpayers shouldn't be footing the bill for federal employees to conduct union business instead of fulfilling their official duties. Taxing or ending official time altogether are common sense options to ensure taxpayer dollars are used responsibly while increasing accountability in the federal workforce. It's important that public funds serve the American people, not private union interests. It does not seem like you should need additional legislation to remove something so preposterous. Mike Lee of Utah said federal employees should not engage in union activities on the taxpayer's dime, which is why I've introduced legislation to ban the practice. So-called official time has been abused as essentially publicly funded political organizing by government employees on federal property, which would be illegal in any other context. We should get rid of it. Public servants should serve the public while on the clock. And, of course, political organizing is another entire aspect of this. And who do unions support? Unions support uniparty candidates. And it goes on. Let's move forward. This is Data Republican on X, formerly Twitter, commenting on a very similar topic. Fun fact. We have an entire AFL-CIO NGO, non-governmental organization. We are financing almost entirely with taxpayer dollars. The Solidarity Center, an NGO affiliated with the AFL-CIO, receives millions in taxpayer dollars to influence labor rights worldwide. Worldwide. It was established alongside the National Endowment for Democracy and serves as the ideological counterpart to CIPE, the free market-focused NGO. We have over 100 million in active spending awards for them. Notice they even say AFL-CIO in their logo, and there it is, the Solidarity Center. So an NGO is spending taxpayer money via the National Endowment for Democracy to influence, quote unquote, labor rights in other countries. They're basically just implementing the global regime's agenda toward global communism, and obviously in a borderless fashion, in other countries around the world. And we are supposed to support this as American, quote unquote, taxpayers, but ultimately just as the American people. Does anyone support this? Does anyone know that this sort of stuff is being done in their names? And 4 years ago, I would have been like, I didn't know that was being done. I didn't know this specific thing was being done until today, to be very clear. But I didn't know this sort of thing was being done. And I shouldn't say 4 years ago at this point, I guess more like 5 years ago. But I think that probably many of us were this same way. Now, some people have been awake to this for their entire lives, and kudos to them. But yeah, I mean, this stuff is incredible. That's the global agenda being implemented worldwide, all coming from the money created on the backs of American labor and blood, and being supported by our efforts throughout the world so that the same regime can be implemented. It is mind-blowing. Barely 45 is a monthly supporter. Thank you. Dan Wright, updated intro is fire. Well, thank you, Dan. And I'm glad that you made that comment after only seeing the intro and not the 5 or so minutes after that. I'm still not entirely certain that today's show is on track where it's supposed to be. You know, did you ever used to play with like Hot Wheels? With the big tracks that they go through, like the loop-de-loops and the figure eights and all that. And they have I don't know what the little machine is that kind of spins them and gives them all the thrust as they make their way through these tracks, or like model trains, for instance. They can't go anywhere else. They're only on that track. And everything's got to be working correctly. The track's got to be right, and the vehicle's got to be going down it correctly. Sometimes they're not exactly aligned, and they just fly off course. That's what today feels like in some way for me. So I hope that you are not too unhappy about bearing with me through this. Just one of those days you get off rhythm, and it's so hard to just get totally back on it. But nevertheless, we will persist. Here is another comment from Donald J. Trump today in his meeting with Emmanuel Macron. Oh no, I'm sorry about that. We're going to skip. We're going to come back to Macron in just a few minutes. So today is the 3rd anniversary of the very brutal invasion into Ukraine. February 24th, 2022. And let's go back to the faux elite commie rag owned by Steve Jobs' widow, The Atlantic. This is global communist Anne Applebaum. Putin's 3 years of humiliation. You get it? These Ukrainians, these very brave Ukrainians protecting their sovereign borders and, of course, their democracy on this this here tank, and, well, that tank doesn't look like it's doing so well, but this one's probably doing just fine, even though it's only got a bulldozer thing here. They're probably kicking lots of ass. Anyhow, Putin has been humiliated for 3 years. And this article is short, so let's have maybe some fun here. Out of all the ugly and dishonest things that Donald Trump said about Volodymyr Zelensky last week, the ugliest was not dishonest at all. I've been watching for years, and I've been watching him negotiate with no cards, Trump said of Zelensky. He has no cards, and you get sick of it. And we discussed this last week. Volodymyr Zelensky has no cards. Sick of it, says Ann Applebaum in italics. Stop and think about that phrase. Trump inserted it into a stream of falsehoods produced over several days, many of which he must have known to be untrue. He has been lying about the origins of the war, about Zelensky's popular support, about the levels of U.S. funding for Ukraine, about the extent of European funding, about the status of previous negotiations. But sick of it? That, at least, has the ring of truth. Trump is genuinely bored of the war. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't know why it started. He doesn't know how to stop it. He wants to change the channel and watch something else, according to Ann Applebaum and her pals, who've been lying about every bit of this the entire time. Trump has no idea. That's what it is. Also, he has no cards. That probably reflects Trump's true belief as well. For Donald Trump, the only real cards are big money and hard power. Oh, wait a second. So you mean he exists in the real world? Players in his world are people whom no court can block, no journalist can question, no legislator can oppose. People whose money can buy anything, whose power cannot be checked or balanced. She is literally saying this as a functionary of the global regime who ultimately at the top of that hierarchy exists the central regime's fiat bankers who create the money out of nothing. They control global media, they control global finance, they control resources, they control trade routes, and they control militaries. Or at least they did control all of those things for decades, if not centuries, if not millennia. That's on whose behalf Ann Applebaum operates. People whose money can buy anything, whose power cannot be checked or balanced. And she's saying here that the courts should be able to stop Trump, the journalists should be able to stop Trump, and that the legislators should be able to stop Trump from carrying out the duties of the office for which he has an overwhelming public mandate. And even when he's operating in the scope of what the Constitution allows, he should still be able to be stopped by whatever people like her have left. That's the argument that she's making. But Trump is wrong. Zelensky might not have money. And he might not be a brutal dictator like Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping. He's just a comedic actor. Yet he does have other kinds of power. He leads a society that organizes itself with local leaders who have legitimacy and a tech sector dedicated to victory, a society that has come around the world to symbolize bravery. He has a message that moves people to act instead of just scaring them into silence. This lady has lost her mind. The society organizes itself. They canceled elections, and people like Ann Applebaum are pretending that the areas where this war, quote unquote, is supposedly taking place are Ukraine. They're actually Russia. This is madness. Today, on the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion, always full scale, which is why I say very brutal. That was one of the words they used to use. It's either full scale or brutal. Stop and remember what happened on the night it began. I'd had plane tickets to Kyiv that week, but my flights were canceled. And on February 4th, 2022, I stayed up and watched the war's start on television. Listening to the sounds of explosions coming from the screen. She doesn't mention it, but I'm sure she was also witnessing the footage of those soldiers with wooden automatic weapons. Maybe she even saw the ghost of Kyiv as he flew over. That night, everyone expected Russia to overrun its smaller neighbor, but that capitulation never came because Russia never actually tried it. 6 weeks later, I made it to Kyiv and heard and saw what happened instead. The hit squads that tried to kill Zelensky, the murders of civilians in Bucha, a Kyiv suburb, the Ukrainian journalists who had driven around the country trying to tell the story, the civilians who had joined the army, the waitresses who had started cooking for the troops. Okay, but you didn't see the devastation or what? Because you were just in Kyiv 2 weeks later? Or 6 weeks later, sorry. 3 years later, against all obstacles and all predictions, the civilians, journalists, soldiers, and waitresses are still working together. Ukraine's million-man army, the largest in Europe, is still fighting. Ukraine's army, the largest in Europe, is still fighting. 1 million strong. That's incredible. Ukraine's civil society is still volunteering, still raising money for the troops. Ukraine's defense industry has transformed itself. In 2022, I saw tiny workshops that made drones out of what looked like cardboard and glue. Wow, man. In 2024, Ukrainian factories produced 1.5 million drones. And this year, they will make many more. Teams of people in underground control centers now use bespoke software to hit thousands of targets every month. Sometimes they're even targets in Ukraine, like their totally inoperative Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Their work explains why Russia has taken territory only slowly, despite being on the offensive for most of the past year. At the current rate of advance, the Institute for the Study of War estimates Russia would need 83 years to capture the remaining 80% of Ukraine. Russia doesn't have the resources to fight indefinitely against that kind of organization and determination. Putin's military production is cannibalizing his country's civilian economy. Inflation has skyrocketed. The only way Putin wins now, the only way he finally succeeds in destroying Ukraine's sovereignty, is by persuading Ukraine's allies to be sick of the war. He wins by persuading Trump to cut off Ukraine because Zelensky has no cards, and by convincing Europeans they can't win either. That's why Putin's money bought American influencers in Tennessee. What? You know what she's talking about? I'm certain. She's talking about, wow. Yeah, she's talking about Benny Johnson and Tim Pool. How about that info op coming back around? She links to an article there. Lucrative payments to the talking heads of Tenet Media, a Tennessee-based far-right influencer team. That is incredible. So you'll remember the Merrick Garland induced investigation into Tenet Media. We talked about that on this show. American influencers in Tennessee. I didn't notice that earlier and have that thought, but wow, that's incredible. So Putin bought off those guys to convince Americans and Europeans, I guess, that Zelensky actually can't win, that he has no cards. So in Tennessee and probably many other places too, and it's why his propaganda supported the pro-Russian far right in Germany's elections yesterday, along with other pro-Russian parties across the continent. Putin can't win on the ground, but he can win in his enemies' heads if we let him. So what they call the far right, all of that everywhere is just Russian propaganda. It's just Vladimir Putin. He did it here. He's convinced all of us of Russian propaganda, and we are now the far right, even if we are the most moderate people the country has. The extremists are in the Uniparty right and the Uniparty left, the people who want war forever and believe that we should be taking over the world and basically operating all of these colonies and defending them with American blood and treasure, despite them just being proxy states of the global regime. That's not seen as an extreme view. That's seen as a moderate view. We're the extremists for being like, you know what? It seems like invading foreign countries and taking them over and then operating them as slave states isn't such a good idea. That's not something we really support as Americans. Yeah, we're the extremists, totally. Europeans and Americans, Democrats and Republicans can resist the temptations of boredom and distraction. We can refuse to give in to the cynicism, nihilism, and lies of Russian propaganda, even when they are repeated by the President of the United States. And we can refuse to believe that Ukraine has no cards, that we have no cards, and that the democratic world has no sources of power other than Donald Trump and Elon Musk. 3 years into this war, the stakes are the same as they were on the night it began. Putin, who yesterday launched one of the largest attacks of the entire war, still seeks to destroy Ukraine's sovereignty, civil society, democracy, and freedom. He still wants to show the world that the era of American power is over, that America will not defend allies in Europe, Asia, or anywhere else. He still wants to nullify the rules and laws that kept Europe peaceful for 8 decades to create instability and fear, not only in the countries that border Russia, but across the continent and even around the world. The war will only end, truly end, when Putin gives up these goals. Don't accept any peace deal that allows him to keep them. So, war forever, at any cost, no matter what, and any suggestion that war forever at any cost should not be the policy pursued is considered Russian propaganda. She says actually Zelensky does have these cards if the U.S. doesn't abandon him. And Europe has these cards if only the U.S. will not abandon them. And the Ukraine and Europe have these cards if the international rules-based order is maintained. So basically, all of that can still work if America and Donald Trump continue to go along implementing the agenda of that global regime on behalf of the global regime's bankers, using the American military might and America's economic might and control of resources and control of trade, all for the benefit of Ukraine and the global regime, because that's how we'll keep their system in place. So actually, it's possible that their system remains in place if everyone just gets on board with their program, as no one has done for the last 3 years, as their program has been exposed throughout that entire time and has been found wanting. The American people actually are rejecting it. And more than half the nations in the world, representing more than half the population in the world and half the economy in the world, have rejected it. But come on, guys, do us a favor. It's our 3-year anniversary, don't you know? Don't you want us to help? This is the Associated Press today, reprinted in ABC News. She tells Putin that China is pleased with Russia's efforts to end the Ukraine war. China's President Xi Jinping had a call with Russia's President Vladimir Putin on Monday and said he was pleased with Moscow's efforts to hold a summit with the U.S. toward ending the war in Ukraine, the state broadcaster reported. Putin updated Xi on the latest contacts with the U.S., according to CCTV, which didn't give further details. Xi said that China is pleased to see that Russia and relevant parties have made positive efforts to resolve the crisis. The Chinese side expressed support for the dialogue between Russia and the U.S. and said it is prepared to assist to peacefully resolve the conflict, according to a statement from the Kremlin. The call came as a dozen leaders from Europe and Canada visited Ukraine's capital on Monday to mark the 3rd anniversary of Russia's Full-scale invasion. It's almost like that Simpsons meme. What is it? Is it like they're getting Bart to say the thing or whatever? Full-scale invasion. And show their support for Kyiv. She also reiterated China's stance, which includes a Friends of Peace group established last September with several other countries to promote efforts to end the war. China and Brazil issued a joint peace plan last year that called for a peace conference with both Ukraine and Russia and no expansion of the battlefield. Xi and Putin have had a close relationship, which is also reflected in the country's ties. China has become a major customer for Russian oil and gas and a source of key technologies following sweeping Western sanctions on Moscow. Well, that's good that they admit that. So the sanctions that people like Ann Applebaum, of course, believe are not only the correct move at the time that they were put in, but are still the correct move and should be increased, are actually going to cripple the Russian economy. That's one of our pieces of leverage that we might have. Except that it actually strengthened Russia and China's positions. So what is she trying to accomplish through these moves? Russia and China are on the same side. Brazil's on that side too. Russia and the U.S. just met in Saudi Arabia. And Mohammed bin Salman is on the same program that Trump is on and that Xi and Putin are on and that Brazil's on and the rest of the BRICS nations are on. There are no cards in Europe or in Ukraine. Let's continue because the terms of the deal are very important. Trump's trying to make a deal right now. This is from yesterday in the Washington Post. Zelensky seeks Trump meeting, questions terms of U.S. mineral deal. So we've gone back and forth a number of times now. The deal was out there. Zelensky said no. Then it came out that Zelensky had agreed to the deal. Then he said no again. They're just flirting and going back and forth. And every time they do that, the reaction comes from the Uniparty and the Uniparty's media, and it gets more ridiculous each and every time. I think I said this on Saturday night on DPH. I hope I'm not repeating myself to this audience if I also said it on Friday. But it seems to me that Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine, and I think I did say it on Friday, but to reiterate then, Netanyahu and Israel both seem like they are Judas goats, creating this nonstop narrative escalation that ends up not going anywhere, but is promoted from all corners of the neocon and neoliberal establishment. And these people come out in force and are immediately rejected by the public because the public doesn't want to see these war efforts continue. It doesn't matter which side they're on. They want the issues, the narratives, the wars to end. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called Sunday for a meeting with Trump as the United States continues to push a deal for access to his country's minerals and said he would step down if it would bring peace to Ukraine or in exchange for NATO membership, sequences of events that remain unlikely. Right? So he's totally illegitimate. They don't have elections. They're not intending to have elections. Russia and the United States said he should have elections. Then we can have a ceasefire. Then we'll have elections, and then there will be a peace deal. So let's just have Ukrainian elections. And the answer from the regime comes back: no, we can't do that. We can't have elections because if the elections were legitimate in any way, of course, they wouldn't achieve the intended results. And Valery Zaluzhny seems to be the man who is being put forward as the replacement for Zelensky. So Zelensky says, listen, I'll step down. All you have to do is have Russia retreat and give us the peace that we request on our terms, or bring us into NATO. And of course, neither of those things are going to happen. The Trump administration has cast doubt on Ukraine reaching its goal of becoming a NATO member, frustrating Kyiv at an important bargaining chip. An important bargaining chip might be taken off the table before any serious negotiations with Russia even begin. But Zelensky said Sunday that discussion of Ukraine joining the alliance and thus benefiting from its collective security guarantee remains on the table. It doesn't matter who wants that or not, supports this idea or not, he said. He also said that he wants Trump to visit Kyiv, or at least to meet him in person before meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. If Trump were to meet Putin first, Zelensky said, there would be disbelief at the United States. It would be bad for U.S. society. I'd really like for him to be on our side, he said, adding that Washington playing the role of mediator is not enough. You might remember, by the way, that Trump and Zelensky have already met in person just a couple months ago. Zelensky continued to push back on the initial terms of a U.S. proposed deal to give the U.S. access to the country's rare minerals, arguing that it both miscalculated the amount of money sent to Ukraine and unilaterally changed past grant deals into loans. I'm not signing something that will have to be repaid by generations and generations of Ukrainians, Zelensky said. Well, you might be. And you continue to ask for money. So perhaps you've already spent the money that generations upon generations of Ukrainians will have to repay. And we will continue on in just a second, but let's hit a Rumble ad, shall we? In today's society, it's tough to be a man in a world dominated by overly masculine liberal women. That's just not how it was meant to be. Everywhere we look, wow, I sound like a liberal woman. Woohoo! That almost never happens to me now that I no longer smoke, sadly. Everywhere we look, it's gender neutral, this product, or made for her, that product. This is why we started a men's company that embodies the ethos of Men's Lives Matter too, with products that aren't designed to be gender neutral or used by people with pronouns. Our products at Rumble are designed to be designed and built for men, by men, period. So if you struggle with low energy, mood swings, or hair loss, or if you need to perform better at the gym, maybe in bed, and recover quicker after, throw out all your other garbage supplements and try animal organs. They are traditionally the most nutrient-rich supplements on the planet, but our bison organs are a step above. The grass-fed, non-vaccinated bison are a species where the weak are allowed to die and only the strong survive. So here's our commitment to you from men who have real confidence in their products. Try this today, and if you don't like it, fine. Return it for a refund. Go to BeNaked.com, code STUDIO, and get 15% off today. How about that? Animal organs. Sounds very savage. We all like being a little savage every now and then, right? That's what men do. We're men. We're savage. This is the man show. Oh, man. I guess we don't have pronouns. So, in regard to the minerals in Ukraine, which is the major topic of debate and discussion at this point, and I really do wonder, if we are going to find out, I suspect that we will find out, that these deals were made long ago and that much of the money sent to Ukraine is just payments for some of these mineral resources, and that these deals have already been made. I cannot personally imagine, and maybe you can, and I can't, and maybe I'm wrong and you're right, but I cannot personally imagine that these negotiations and these deals are being hammered out in real time by the comedic actor, Donald Trump's emissaries, and Vladimir Putin's emissaries, and J.D. Vance.
Ukraine, and do you expect Zelensky to sign it?
By the way, this is Scott Bessent for those listening to the audio version. This is Scott Bessent with Maria Bartiromo on Sunday Morning Futures. And if you're looking at the screen, you will see that I snagged this from the War Room's cold open this morning. Thanks, guys.
I do expect that President Zelensky will sign. What it does not include is a military guarantee, but what it does include is an implicit guarantee that if the United States of America is heavily invested in the economic future, I call it an economic security guarantee. The more assets that U.S. companies have on the ground, the bigger interest that the U.S. has in the future of Ukrainian economy doing well, the more security it creates for the Ukrainian people, and the higher the return for the U.S. taxpayer. Again, President Trump has structured this win-win deal, and it's unfortunate that after my meeting with President Zelensky and then his meeting in Munich with Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Rubio, the idea here of my trip to Ukraine and then the meeting in Munich, we want to intertwine the U.S. and Ukrainian economies for the benefit of both. And unfortunately, President Zelensky seems to have put a bit of daylight between us, but I am sure in the long run or in the short run, there is no daylight. The deal will be signed, and this will give President Trump a lever, and it will be a strong signal to Russian leadership that the U.S. is in a serious partnership with the Ukrainian people.
President Zelensky is speaking right now, saying today that he was willing to give up his position if it meant peace in Ukraine, quipping that he could exchange his departure for Ukraine's entry into NATO. Zelensky also says he wanted to see Donald Trump as a partner to Ukraine and more than simply a mediator between Kyiv and Moscow. I want it to be more than just mediation. That's not enough, he told a press conference just moments ago. Your reaction? Is this also suggesting that there could be a change in leadership in Ukraine?
Maria, I try to stay in my economics and finance lane. So this is the first that I've heard about it. But at some point, Ukrainian people, it's a democracy. They're going to have an election, and they will democratically elect a leader. President Zelensky has been a wartime president, and we've seen in the history of this, Winston Churchill was a fantastic wartime leader, and then the British people decided to move on after he had done great job during World War II.
I mean, I guess if you say so. So what I found particularly interesting about this clip has to do with Scott Bessent and his career prior to taking this role. He was managing finances for George Soros, and he was with the Soros organization in 2015 and prior, when the Soros organization moved in post-Maidan to Ukraine. And as we've discussed many times in this show, part of that strategy was to bring in all of this global investment money, the same sort of strategy that we talk about when we discuss Venezuela, the International Crisis Group reports, etc. You can see this stuff outlined in a number of places. I actually spent some time trying to find this one resource that I used in, I think, 2022. And I really want to get it back because it kind of laid out, I think it was a summary of this agreement, this very lengthy agreement about what would happen, I think, with the World Bank and other parties once the overthrow of the Ukrainian government happened after 2014. And the plan was to bring in all of this outside investment money and set up branches of transnational corporations, new industries, take over Ukrainian energy resources, etc., with all this new money. And the profits would then be funneled through the Open Society Foundation. Soros would direct the money in and then take the money out. But of course, the Open Society Foundation is a charity. Now, I don't know that Bessent had any direct involvement with that program. I have not been able to nail that down, just to be very, very clear. And again, not to cast any aspersions on Scott Bessent, but it's interesting that he was in that place then, and this place now, and what is being discussed by him is industries and resources, etc., in Ukraine being controlled by U.S. companies and perhaps the U.S. government. Now, if you see the prior situation as being exactly the same but controlled by the global regime, then the changeover here would be very slight. It's that it goes from the control of the global regime to the control of America in a more sovereign, nationalist, constitutional, and independent fashion. So the war that's happened would be the story that explains why all of that was under the control of the global regime in Ukraine as this corrupt global regime proxy state, a center of drug and weapons and human trafficking, the center of corruption, biomedical research, etc., bioweapons labs, all of that would be essentially transferred in control and ownership. And the reason that this always kind of captures my attention is because that is very, very, it's the same model that we've discussed many times when it comes to drainage, when it comes to what I believe happened with Twitter upon Elon Musk's takeover. I've said countless times, you cannot buy for $44 billion the most powerful information weapon in the history of the world from billionaires who use that information weapon to make their billions, to control markets, to control economies, to overthrow governments, etc. Okay? So this is a major regime asset that seems to be switching hands. If they were controlling Ukrainian energy resources, Ukrainian territory, Ukrainian rare earth minerals, companies that were set up in Ukraine, etc., and that was the status quo ante, and that's going to be changing over so that now it's under U.S. control, but overseen by Donald Trump throughout this process, then either it's changing hands from the evil twin to the good twin, and that's what we can hope, or it's remaining in the same hands and we're just being dog-walked into an extension of our dystopia. But what's not happening is that negotiations are being done by Volodymyr Zelensky as a legitimate president of Ukraine, J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, etc., Russian counterparts, Ukrainians, and Europeans to get this deal in place. Zelensky says he might not sign the deal. Besson says, he's definitely going to sign the deal. Besson sounds very, very confident, does he not? Like the deal's already done. Is there any reason to believe the deal's not done? The deal would be done, even narratively speaking, even within the central narrative, except Zelensky, the Judas goat in my proposed scenario, keeps suggesting that it's not going to happen. And people like Ann Applebaum, so desperate to maintain control, are like, okay, well, all we got to do is get behind Zelensky, and we can still keep all of this under control. That does not make sense. I really need, you know what I need to do? We need to take a short break right here. I feel like the second half of the show is mostly back on track. Like the first 30 minutes or so, man, disheveled. I give myself like a 3 out of 10. And then we began getting a little closer into like the 5 and 6 and maybe 7 range. And all of that is entirely unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. But now I feel like we're in much better shape right now. And because we're in better shape right now, I'm going to have to get this into the soundboard, by the way. But
ladies and gentlemen of this supposed jury, I have one final thing I want you to consider. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Chewbacca. Chewbacca is a Wookiee from the planet Kashyyyk. But Chewbacca lives on the planet Endor. Now think about that. That does not make sense. Damn it.
What?
He's using the Chewbacca defense. Why would a Wookiee, an 8-foot-tall Wookiee, want to live on Endor with a bunch of 2-foot-tall Ewoks? That does not make sense. But more important, you have to ask yourself, what does this have to do with this case? Nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, it has nothing to do with this case. It does not make sense. Look at me. I'm a lawyer defending a major record company, and I'm talking about Chewbacca. Does that make sense? Ladies and gentlemen, I am not making any sense. None of this makes sense. And so you have to remember, when you're in that jury room deliberating and conjugating the Emancipation Proclamation, does it make sense? No. Ladies and gentlemen of this supposed jury, it does not make sense. If Chewbacca lives on Endor, you must acquit. The defense rests.
An infallible case has been made. You got to go with him. You just got to go with him. Now, as I said earlier, Donald Trump and old Manny Mac had a little meeting today. And I got to show this part first because it's hilarious. Trump posted this to his Truth Social. Now, when Trump visited when he visited Notre Dame for the reopening of the cathedral a few months back, I did an episode called King of the World where we went through that. Donald Trump manhandled Emmanuel Macron a couple of times with these handshakes. And now there is this strange contest when Trump meets with certain leaders, and you can watch it right here. Trump posts a very short clip, just 11 seconds long, but in that clip, you can see the manhandling of Manny Mac. How about that? Oh. Isn't that something? Just yanking Manny Mac around. You could just toss him around like a rag doll. That'd be pretty funny, actually. I wonder if Manny Mac has his male wife do that. I don't know that his wife is actually male. It seems like she is, or he is, you know? But it's impossible to say. So let us get to, here is Donald Trump discussing the deal in Ukraine.
It looks like we're getting very close. The deal's being worked on, and we're, I think, getting very close to getting an agreement where we get our money back over a period of time. But it also gives us something where I think it's very beneficial to their economy, to them as a country. But, you know, we're in for $350 billion. How we got there, I don't know. But that's a lot of money, a lot of money invested. And we had nothing to show for it. And it was the Biden administration's fault. The Europeans are in for about $100 billion, and they do it as in the form of a loan. And the Europeans have been great on this issue. They understood it wasn't fair, and we were able to work something out. But with the Ukrainians, I think I can say that we're very close. Scott's around here someplace, and I think we can say that we're very, hi Scott, I think we're very close. Do you have something to say about that, Scott?
We are very close.
Good.
1 yard line.
All right, good.
Mr. President.
So they're at the 1 yard line on the deal, and that, of course, is Scott Bessent. And to cap off my prior point regarding Scott Bessent, again, we have this potential framing. We can see this selection, apart from any knowledge that and experience that Scott Bessent has that would allow him to do the job of Secretary of the Treasury at a very high level. And it seems he does have that knowledge. He also has this background with the Soros thing while Soros was moving into Ukraine at the same time. Not saying involvement directly in the situation, though there might be. Just saying at the same time. So he might have specific knowledge. Same as Dan Bongino might have specific knowledge. And that might come into play in a magnificent way and help us with the disclosure, help the American people understand. Maybe they had some involvement back then and they've become whistleblowers on some level, and we're getting to see them as public communicators. I certainly don't know that to be true. Maybe that is a low probability possibility. All good. It just still seems like a plausible possibility nonetheless. So CNN, by the way, just to hit this quickly because I found this so funny right before I came onto the show today. So Macron interrupts and corrects Trump on Ukraine spending. Look at that. They're being very clear that Manny Mac actually was getting the upper hand right there. And Trump, of course, is, look at this, making fun of him. Fantastic. And then Trump and Elon, oh, they're messing everything up. I've said this, though, not in a long time. It is a bit depressing just having people in my life, and I'm sure this goes for every one of you as well, just having people in my life who still have not broken out in any way from the central narrative. They're still liberals. They voted for Kamala. They think that all of the regime's activities are above board. They believe that the federal government workers are all victims. They believe the whole thing. The reason they still believe that stuff is because the media will not stop lying to them. Okay? And I find that to be incredibly cruel. Like, they are actively harming people I care about and making it impossible for me to have discussions with them about any of these subjects, which, if pressed, they will admit they know very little about. They just don't believe that it's possible that I know more about it than they do, or that I might know about it in ways that the media will refuse to tell them. They cannot believe that the media is, by and large, corrupt and intentionally lying. That just doesn't seem possible. Now, everyone on, quote unquote, our side understands that dynamic, that the mainstream media, and especially the mainstream media on the Uniparty Left, is in fact lying to people they care about, is in fact lying to people who are still on the left, and they can understand how and why that's cruel. My argument takes that one step further and says that these media figures on the Uniparty right are not only lying to those very same people to support the truth of an underlying reality that actually doesn't exist. That's part one. But part two is that they are lying to these very people on our side in a way that they are unable to detect, and that they are actually doing something that is harmful and cruel to these people who have, to some degree, broken out from that central narrative and are now being kept, still penned in to some degree by these communicators because they are on, quote unquote, our side. I think that makes sense. I hope that made sense. I think that is like evil. And people are like, well, why are you being divisive? Divisive? Trying to illustrate the point that everyone understands when it's the other side. If that's divisive, then I guess I'm divisive. Where are we? Hold on. Hold for processing. I got off track a little bit there. Donald Trump is also intending to meet with the comedic actor in Ukraine. Let me just play that clip really quickly here. I hope it doesn't overlap.
We'll be meeting with President Zelensky. In fact, he may come in this week or next week to sign the agreement, and which would be nice. I'd love to meet him. Would meet at the Oval Office. So the agreement's being worked on now. They're very close to a final.
Yeah, so we did. That's an overlap. So let's move on there. I wanted to, in the context of our Europe and Ukraine discussion, and then quickly move into tech, a little bridge right here. This is Ursula von der Leyen. She is the president of the European Commission. I hope I am saying that correctly. She discusses free speech and censorship here.
And finally, it takes results. As technology evolves, we need to build up societal unity around information management. Because research has shown that pre-bunking is much more successful than debunking. Pre-bunking is basically the opposite of debunking. In short, prevention is preferable to cure. Perhaps if you think of information manipulation as a virus, instead of treating an infection once it has taken hold, that's debunking. It is much better to vaccinate so that the body is inoculated. Pre-bunking is the same. Because disinformation relies on people passing it on to others. It is essential that people know what malign information's influence is and what the techniques are that are behind it. And as the knowledge goes up, our chances of being influenced goes down. And that builds up the society resilience that we will need.
It's like a virus, information. It's poisoning their entire system, everything they have worked for. We talked about AI at the beginning. We're going to come back around to that in some respect. Axios today, Trump manufacturing win, Apple to spend $500 billion in U.S., hire 20,000 people. So Donald Trump, in the later stages of the fake campaign, in the second half of last year is when I really started noticing it, at least, he was talking about deals he was setting in place with Tim Cook of Apple. It's amazing that he knew that those deals would be taking place, considering that he had no idea whether or not he'd become president again. Let's take a quick look through this Axios article. Apple on Monday announced plans to invest more than $500 billion in the U.S. and hire 20,000 people over the next 4 years, with expansion and construction planned from coast to coast. And a lot of this was being put in place in the first term as well. $500 billion. We just had that a few weeks ago with Larry Ellison, Sam Altman, and Masayoshi Son. The new jobs will focus on research and development, silicon engineering, software development, and AI and machine learning. Apple plans to greatly expand chip and server manufacturing in the U.S., plus skills development for students and workers across the country. Apple's announcement, which the company calls its largest ever spend commitment, is precisely the kind of win President Trump has been looking for, with his push to move manufacturing back to the U.S. Apple's new investment, much of it in red states, lets Trump say to other companies, Apple can do it, why can't or won't you? Apple said in the announcement, Tim Cook did, we are bullish on the future of American innovation, and we're proud to build our long-standing U.S. investments with this $500 billion commitment to our country's future. From doubling our advanced manufacturing fund from $5 billion to $10 billion, to building advanced technology in Texas, we're thrilled to expand our support for American manufacturing, and we'll keep working with people and companies across the country to help write an extraordinary new chapter in the history of American innovation. Trump met with Cook on Thursday in the Oval Office. Then Trump got so excited that he revealed the plans prematurely, saying on camera while meeting with governors that Cook is investing hundreds of billions of dollars. I hope he's announced it. I hope I didn't announce it, but what the hell? All I do is tell the truth. That's what he told me. Now he has to do it, right? He's investing hundreds of billions of dollars in others too, Trump continued. We will have a lot of chip makers coming in, a lot of automakers coming in. They stopped 2 plants in Mexico that were starting construction. They just stopped them. They're going to build them here instead because they don't want to pay the tariffs. Tariffs are amazing. Apple says it now supports nearly 3 million jobs across the U.S. through direct employment, work with suppliers and manufacturers, and developer jobs in the iOS app economy. Apple already works with thousands of suppliers across all 50 states, including 24 factories in 12 states. Apple's U.S. Advanced Manufacturing Fund has supported projects in 13 states. Reality check. Apple made a similar announcement 4 years ago. In 2021, Apple committed $430 billion in U.S. investments and 20,000 new jobs across the country over 5 years, including a new campus in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, where development was paused last year. And it goes through some of the other projects that they have planned to start. I just want to check something real quick. Where is Research Triangle Park, North Carolina? So we had the deal in 2020. Now we have the deal in 2025. And it's basically the same deal. How about that? And I want to see this on a map. How many times have we observed that exact dynamic? And I'm going to point out in just a moment how we are observing that same dynamic once again that we have observed a number of times already. And you can get there pretty quickly by simply reading Donald Trump's Truth Social post about all of this today, which was, if this was a scavenger hunt, it would be the easiest scavenger hunt of all time. He said, Apple has announced a record $500 billion investment in the United States of America. The reason, faith in what we are doing, without which they wouldn't be investing 10 cents. Thank you, Tim Cook and Apple. And people pointed out today that he misplaced the apostrophe in wouldn't, and that's interesting. Maybe it's something, maybe it's nothing. But I want to focus here on 10 cents. I have very little doubt that he was referencing something else. And that's this. This is Reuters from August 15th of last year. Apple begins delicate dance with 10 cent in China. Apple will have to tread carefully again in China. The iPhone maker wants a share of revenue from games played on 10 cents all-in-one WeChat platform. For Apple boss Tim Cook, it's a lucrative opportunity as handset sales cool. Yet if the U.S. company pushes too hard, it may jeopardize its hard-earned appeal in the world's second largest economy. Tencent Chief Strategy Officer James Mitchell on Thursday confirmed that the two companies were in discussions about revenue sharing on so-called mini games or titles played directly on WeChat. Many titles can be played without users having to download them from an app store. Now, WeChat is China's everything app, and that is potentially what will be happening with X, formerly Twitter, in the United States of America. That is what Elon is meant to be developing, the everything app, the American counterpart to WeChat. It's going to handle payments. He's talked many times about that. It's got the artificial intelligence component. The games part, I'm not familiar with that on X, and I haven't heard anything about that, but you might have. I obviously don't spend much time on that platform anymore. This seems like a direct allusion, and so I asked the machine, and this is Perplexity today, how do Trump, Apple, Tencent, and ByteDance interact? And ByteDance, of course, is the parent company for TikTok. Donald Trump, Apple, Tencent, and ByteDance have had complex interactions shaped by trade, technology, and national security concerns. Apple has sought to navigate Trump's trade policies, including tariffs on Chinese goods. CEO Tim Cook maintained a close relationship with Trump during his presidency, securing tariff carve-outs and recently announcing a $500 billion U.S. investment plan, which Trump praised as a result of his policies. Again, basically that same announcement happened years ago. Trump versus Tencent and ByteDance. During his first term, Trump targeted Tencent, owner of WeChat, and ByteDance, owner of TikTok, with executive orders banning U.S. transactions with these companies due to national security concerns. These moves aimed to limit Chinese influence over American data, but faced legal and political challenges. And again, this was something addressed by Trump in 2020, and the TikTok data was then moved under Oracle. Larry Ellison, who came into the office just a month ago to talk about a similar $500 billion investment for the exact same sorts of infrastructure and technology development in the United States of America. Apple with Tencent and ByteDance. Despite U.S.-China tensions, Apple has explored partnerships with Tencent and ByteDance to integrate their AI models into iPhones sold in China, addressing local regulatory requirements for generative AI. These interactions reflect the intersection of politics, trade, and technology in shaping global business strategies, so saith the machine. So it's incredible, isn't it, how all of these come around in this long, years-long circle back to the present, as though they were all decided back then and are just being disclosed in a series of reruns to the general public. Manipulation of the informational time machine could just be a good thing. You had to wake up the normies. You had to allow for this changeover in our society without causing a civil war, meaning that Trump has to step away. He can't contest the obviously stolen elections, the vast corruption and criminality of the deep state. It all has to be, they had to put everything on pause. Now it has to be released to the public in this series of reruns, sometimes with these media figures disclosing all of it to the public. That's why Trump brings them in closer to the administration. All of it could be for good. Or there is another possibility, and that possibility is a very depressing one and a very daunting one. And it's not fun to explore that possibility. And if you bring it up, well, then you're accused of blackpilling rather than providing a warning. Oh, hey, I'm not entirely sure that all of this is as good as we would like to believe it is. You don't have to think Trump is bad in any of the scenario that I just described. He might be doing his damnedest to wake everybody up while the rest of this continues to move forward, because he alone and he with whoever's around him can't on their own stop all this. They might actually need the help of people who understand. They might need the American people to rise up and provide them with the momentum to actually succeed in their robbing of that singularity train. Elon Musk just said yesterday that we're on the event horizon of the singularity. That moment is approaching. Which way is it going to go? We want it to go our way, which is why we need to be cognizant and recognize the threats if and where they exist. And I think personally, it's been my judgment to be more cautious about these things rather than sitting back and eating popcorn and cheerleading, because at some point you can only trust the plan so much before you're just not doing anything at all. And I don't think, as an American people who want a government of by and for the people, that what we should do is hear Donald Trump say, we are giving power back to you, the people, and to that respond, thank you, Trump. We are now going to give it back to the cast of Fox News. I am going to check the chat. Dan Wright. Oh, no, that was from before. Thank you for that from before, Dan. And I think that might be the bulk of it. I remember there being a question that I was going to answer, but I don't seem to be finding it quickly. I think it was about basically like how, oh, here it was. So what do you suggest to help POTUS pick better hires? I mean, we have certainly learned we live amongst a huge number of corrupted citizens, dual citizens, and illegals. I agree with you, all of you, about the second half of that. What I propose, I don't believe that Trump is making bad hires, okay? There's a difference between someone being a good person who's going to come in and do a good job for the benefit of everyone, and someone still being a correct decision made by Trump for a purpose and a reason I'm not privy to. Okay? I'm not saying Trump's making incorrect decisions. That's not the point I'm making at all. And I hope that that's abundantly clear. I feel like I've made that point abundantly clear, and I'm not, by saying that, trying to knock this question at all in any way. Okay? It's entirely possible he's making the right decision in every one of these scenarios, but that our response should not be to therefore applaud and be like, this is the best guy ever. We're going to give this guy the benefit of the doubt in every scenario now forever. Okay? That, looking back in hindsight, that would not have been an advisable strategy for all of those picks during the first term. All right? So to take a deeper look at it, to think more deeply about what he might be doing, it's certainly not an insult to Trump. And if the people that are being selected are insulted by the American public questioning them rather than simply just accepting Trump's word for it, well, that's their problem. Okay? Then they, at that point, are no different than the federal workers complaining that it's not somebody else's right to fire them. It's not the president's right to fire them on behalf of the American people. If Donald Trump is a servant of the people, a tribune of the people, etc., well, then he should be responsive to the people. I believe Donald Trump is highly responsive to the people. At that point, then, the people have to be analyzing in a critical way the decisions he makes. And it is the trust we have for Trump and the reverence we have for his commitment to the country and what it is he's doing that makes us give him the benefit of the doubt above and beyond all these other people. And even when we believe that the decisions he makes on these things doesn't mean that the person's good, even when we decide, oh, hey, I still don't like that person, that doesn't mean that we're saying he's making bad decisions or that we lose trust for him. That is the wealth, the store of trust that Trump has built up. I don't think there's anything inconsistent about that view, and I will continue to hold it. And I think it's everybody's responsibility to be looking into these things and to be thinking, hey, maybe he's picked out these people for some reason other than this guy's going to come in and be the best Gestapo employee that the Gestapo has ever had. All right, I'm going to do one more Rumble ad, and then we're going to get on out of here. I always love doing positive because I do love my dog very much. If you have a dog, we've all been there. Our pup goes from full energy to sick and miserable in an instant, and at the worst times. Then we're calling vets in the middle of the night or on weekends trying to find a clinic that will take us in. It's a terrible way to manage our dog's health, not to mention our own stress levels and our own monthly budgets. That's why people are getting the Pet Emergency Kit by Positive. It contains critical medications and supplies that can not only keep you out of the veterinary office, but may even save your dog's life. Their kits contain critical medications like activated charcoal, styptic powder, and more. It might save your dog's life. Head on over to positive.com and use code STUDIO to get 15% off your Pet Emergency Kit. And with that, I will thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for hanging out in the chat. And as far as the subscriber stream for this week goes, that'll be at 6 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. And the public live stream will be back on Friday. So I will see you Wednesday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns did not work. They lied to you about a pandemic. And Joe Biden absolutely was never president.
Well,
what?
You know who I am, don't you?
Well, you ain't Fiona Apple, and if you ain't Fiona Apple, I don't give a rat's ass.
Ah!
And what's wrong with being an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times? What do you think, Max?
Do you want to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our time.
It's not true. It's more true than I would perhaps prefer.
Can we stop this cruel game and allow the boy to keep one shred of dignity? For God's sakes! I can't stand to see him in all this pain! You vicious bastards! Let him move in with you! Is it so bad to see somebody happy? So just let him move in! For the love of God, let the boy move in with you! Good Lord!
And I will not let you down.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
What? In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com, and for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.